when the girl came to the big company for an interview. She discovered that her boyfriend was actually the president of the company. This made the girl unable to believe it for a while. She had always thought that her boyfriend was a poor boy from the same family background as her. After the interview, her boyfriend confessed the truth to her. The girl was not happy about it. Instead, she felt like she had been cheated, because Jin-hee knew her own background and situation. She was humble and many people looked down on her. Her mother remarried and didn't care about her. She also had to take care of her mentally disabled younger sister. So she just wants to find a man from the same background as her to overcome the difficulties in reality. Jin-hee really can't accept that her boyfriend has been hiding his identity and dating her. She thinks that her boyfriend is just afraid that if he tells her his real identity, she will keep pestering him for money. So he pretended to be poor to test her. Ji-ho really loves Jin-hee. He is afraid that if he tells her his identity, he will lose this relationship. That's why he has never found a good opportunity to confess. Jin-hee can't listen to any explanation from her boyfriend. She asks for a cooling off period. Jin-hee returned to the rental house and cried sadly. Ji-ho also waited outside her door all night. The next day, he saw the landlord showing the house to someone and realized that Jin-hee was moving out. So he hurriedly asked his secretary Ji-yeon to find an apartment near the company. He was going to live with Jin-hee to strengthen their relationship. The self-absorbed Ji-yeon thought Ji-ho was going to live with her. She was so excited that she didn't know what to do. Overjoyed, she found an apartment that she was very satisfied with, and spent a lot of time carefully buying her favorite items. While Ji-yeon was preparing the house for Ji-ho, in order to reassure Jin-hee, took her directly to meet his parents. But Jin-hee refused the marriage in front of Ji-ho's parents, saying that the two of them were of different status and it was inappropriate. The chairman asked his son what he thought. Ji-ho said if they could not be together because of status, he was willing to resign as chairman. His father angrily said, "Quitting your job because of a woman is really unmanly. You can't even win the heart of a woman you want to marry." After his parents left, Ji-ho opened up to Jin-hee and told her the reason why he had hidden his identity. It turned out that when he was 13, his mother suddenly disappeared without a trace. Not long after that, his stepmother moved in. From then on, he began to hate his father and resent his mother. He thought about how to get rid of his stepmother. At that time, all he had in his life was resentment. It wasn't until Jin-hee's appearance that Ji-ho's life changed. He knew that Jin-hee liked poor children. He was afraid that if he confessed sincerely, Jin-hee would suddenly disappear like his mother. Jin-hee knew about Ji-ho's painful past, and her heart slowly changed. After meeting, Ji-ho's stepmother couldn't help but feel curious about Jin-hee, so she asked Ji-yeon to secretly investigate Jin-hee. Ji-yeon prepared the apartment to her liking and came to the company to tell Ji-ho. Ji-ho asked her to prepare another piece of jewelry for her, and asked what kind of marriage proposal the girl would like, which made Ji-yeon think even more that he was going to propose to her. The chairman met with Jin-hee alone, and took out the resignation letter that his son gave him, and apologized to Jin-hee for lying to his son, and hoped that Jin-hee and his son could support each other. Jin-hee was both surprised and moved when she heard. The chairman said that Ji-ho's resignation or reinstatement now depends on her. Ji-yeon reported Jin-hee's situation to her stepmother. She also revealed the fact that she has liked Ji-ho since she was a child, so she wanted to come to the house to greet the chairman. However, she accidentally heard the chairman's conversation with Yuri. The chairman said that Jin-hee is smart and clever. He likes her very much. Ji-yeon was stunned when she heard this. She then realized that Ji-ho's marriage partner is not herself. Ji-yeon rushed to the apartment she had prepared for Ji-ho in a state of desperation, but witnessed Ji-ho proposing to Jin-hee with her own eyes. This scene deeply irritated her, and what made Ji-yeon find it most unacceptable was that Ji-ho had fallen in love with the daughter of her father's remarried wife. Ji-yeon was so jealous that she was about to go crazy. Her hands trembled uncontrollably and she bumped into a vase, alarming Jin-hee and the others. She was so scared that she quickly hid. Ji-ho didn't see anyone there and thought the wind had blown it over. He took the opportunity to celebrate with Jin-hee, while Ji-ho went to the car to get something. Ji-yeon could no longer control her anger. She went up and overturned the fruit plate Jin-hee was going to wash. Jin-hee was startled and asked Ji-yeon why she was there. Ji-yeon yelled at Jin-hee like crazy, saying that she had prepared everything in the house, and asked Jin-hee if she wanted to work in the same company as her to get close to Ji-ho, and said that her tactics of seducing men were exactly the same as her mother's. Jin-hee desperately explained that it wasn't what she thought, but Ji-yeon simply wouldn't listen to her, and just finished talking about herself before walking away. Then, in a rage, she went to the parking lot, picked up the fire extinguisher nearby, and smashed it hard onto Ji-ho's luxury car. The window glass shattered all over the ground. When she got home, Ji-yeon took her anger out on Jin-hee's mother, and told her to get out of her room. When she opened her bag, she found that the resume she had torn up was gone, so she came to question her mentally challenged younger sister. When she saw that her younger sister had destroyed the resume, Ji-yeon slapped her directly. Suya was so scared by Ji-yeon that she burst into tears. Ji-yeon didn't want Jin-hee and Ji-ho to live together. She hypocritically proposed to her father that Jin-hee move in with the family. Hearing Ji-yeon's false concern, Jin-hee's mother was full of relief. Ji-ho was having dinner with his family that day. His younger sister Ji-won promises her father that she will introduce her marriage partner to them, but Ji-ho strongly opposes it. Because he knows that the person his younger sister likes is a triad boss Yoo-jun. Jin-hee is being difficult by her boss Ji-won on her first day at work, and she is asked to write an evaluation report on new products. Jin-hee works twice as hard as others in order to stay in the company. She can only catch a breath during lunchtime. Ji-ho specially prepares lunch to enjoy it with her. Ji-yeon is furious when she sees the two of them. She vows to find a way to get Jin-hee fired. Jin-hee is busy working overtime on the new product evaluation report. When she gets tired, she goes to the bathroom to freshen up. Unexpectedly, when Ji-yeon comes to the office to find her, she finds confidential documents on her desk, and Jin-hee's email is not closed. Ji-yeon quickly finds the business card of the head of the rival company, and sends the company's confidential documents in Jin-hee's name, claiming that she was selling confidential company documents. Unaware of what was going on, Jin-hee perked up and went back to the office to cheer herself up. Just then, her stepfather called and asked her to come home. Jin-hee was overjoyed at the prospect of living with her mother again. Ji-yeon even pretended to welcome her back by preparing her clothes. Faced with Ji-yeon's sudden enthusiasm, Jin-hee didn't know what to do. The next day, when the family was having breakfast, Ji-yeon lied and said she needed to go to the bathroom, and then snuck into Jin-hee's room, and rummaged through Jin-hee's bag to find her phone and bankbook, and transferred the account to a rival company to demand compensation. Unexpectedly, after receiving the news, the person in charge of the rival company not only did not transfer the money, but also wanted to use this incident to demand more company secrets from Jin-hee. In the afternoon, Jin-hee received a call from the rival company. Captain Park threatened Jin-hee with charges of industrial espionage and asked her to meet him. Although Jin-hee didn't understand what the other person was saying, she agreed to meet him in order to set the record straight. However, after learning about the emails and messages she had sent, Jin-hee was completely dumbfounded. She had never done anything like that. However, no matter how she explained, the other party would not believe her. The other party thought that Jin-hee was playing with them, and said that they would go to the company and talk to her superiors. Back at the company, no matter how Jin-hee explained, the evidence in front of her pointed to her being a commercial spy. After confirming this information, Ji-won immediately asked an employee to check Jin-hee's bank account and mobile phone number. However, after verification, it was confirmed to be Jin-hee's bank account and mobile phone number. Ji-won was furious when she saw the evidence. She slapped Jin-hee hard. Jin-hee insisted that she had not done anything like that, but she had no evidence to prove her innocence. Ji-won angrily threw her out. Ji-yeon saw Jin-hee being scolded and pretended to comfort her. Jin-hee ran to the bathroom and cried loudly. On the other side, Ji-ho's stepmother found that no one was at home, so she sent the nanny away. Then she deliberately hid her husband's ventilator. The chairman was having a seizure and couldn't find the ventilator, so he desperately shouted for help. However, the stepmother was leisurely taking a bath and listening to music in the bathroom. Just as the chairman was dying, Ji-ho returned home. He heard his father struggling in pain. He hurriedly ran into his father's room, but found his father had fainted on the ground. Ji-ho hurriedly looked for the ventilator but couldn't find it. In a hurry, he had to call an ambulance first, and then angrily searched the house for the maid and stepmother. He couldn't see a single person in such a big villa. Finally, he heard some noise in the toilet and broke in. When he saw his stepmother leisurely in front of him, Ji-ho instantly became furious, and asked her where she had hidden the ventilator. At the hospital, Yuri pretended to be sad when she saw Ji-won. Ji-won also took this opportunity to ask her boyfriend Yoo-jun to come and see her father, because she was worried that her father's health would not last long. Jin-hee also rushed to see the chairman when she heard the news. Ji-won was furious when she saw her, and was even more furious when she learned that Jin-hee was her brother's intended. She demanded that the woman be thrown out immediately. Ji-ho questioned his sister about what was going on. Ji-won then told him that Jin-hee was a business spy, and accused her brother of why he would like such a woman. Jin-hee tried her best to defend herself, saying that she had never done anything like that. Unexpectedly, the seriously ill chairman heard it, and when he learned that Jin-hee was actually a business spy, he suddenly became agitated and vomited blood. Jin-hee saw this and quickly went up to help the chairman wipe it off, but Ji-won pushed her away. As a result, the chairman was rushed to the operating room. When father became like this, the family blamed Ji-ho for everything. How can you date someone who betrayed the company? But Ji-ho simply does not believe that Jin-hee is a business spy, and demands that Ji-won investigate it properly. Jin-hee also wants to clear her name. She thinks that the company's surveillance cameras can definitely prove her innocence. The next morning, Jin-hee tried to go to the surveillance room but was denied entry. She was excited and claimed that she had evidence to prove her innocence. Unexpectedly, this scene was heard by her sister who had set her up. Learning that Jin-hee had found evidence, Ji-yeon instantly panicked. She quickly came forward and said she was willing to help. Hearing this good news, Jin-hee was overjoyed. Little did she know that Jin-hee would miss the opportunity to prove her innocence as a result. Meanwhile, the people from the rival company found Ji-won and forced Ji-won to sign a contract to terminate the launch of the new product under the threat of the company's reputation. Ji-won's resentment towards Jin-hee deepened even more. Seeing Jin-hee appear at the company, she angrily ordered the security guard to throw her out. Jin-hee tried her best to explain that she was not a business spy, but was mocked by Ji-won. She finally asked Ji-won to go and check the surveillance, so that she could prove that she did not do it. However, Ji-won refused her. This scene happened to be seen by Ji-ho, a company employee. Jin-hee saw Ji-ho call for help. Ji-ho left without looking back, but after returning to the company, he went to help Jin-hee confirm the surveillance. This is when he learned that it was Ji-yeon who did it. At this time, Ji-yeon was very anxious. She was thinking about how to get rid of the surveillance, so she consulted the relevant personnel. She learned that the surveillance footage could be altered, so she immediately went to the surveillance room and got the original footage, and paid triple the price to have it altered. Just as Ji-won remembered to check the surveillance footage, Ji-yeon hurriedly caught up to her and showed Ji-won the altered file. After repeated confirmation, the surveillance footage only showed Jin-hee. Her trust in Jin-hee collapsed. Ji-ho, the only one who knew the truth, did not tell the truth. She even mercilessly rejected Jin-hee's request for help. It turns out that Ji-ho is the illegitimate son of Ji-ho's stepmother and the chairman, because the chairman has never been able to accept his existence. Yuri sent him to live abroad for 20 years. Now that the time is ripe, Yuri has called him back to take Ji-ho's place. Watching the chairman on the sickbed, gasping for breath, Yuri's wicked thoughts arose. She deliberately told the chairman about how she had engineered the removal of Ji-ho's mother. When the chairman heard this, his emotions flared up. He hated the vicious woman who wanted to strangle her, but it was already too late, because he had already assigned his will a day earlier. Yuri was only thinking about making the chairman angry and die quickly because she learned that she had inherited his wealth. In this way, she could take her son back to live with her. Sure enough, the chairman died suddenly due to excessive emotional agitation. Yuri, however, pretended to be heartbroken in front of everyone. That day, Ji-yeon was driving to pick up her phone when she had an accident. She saw a woman lying in a pool of blood and screamed in fear. Ji-won desperately begged her to save her unborn child, but Ji-yeon ignored her and panicked, driving away from the scene. Unexpectedly, Ji-won grabbed the ankle bracelet in her hand. However, after Ji-yeon left, Jin-hee happened to pass by. She immediately got out of the car to check the situation. Unexpectedly, her actions made her the perpetrator of the accident. Jin-hee saw that the person lying on the ground was her boyfriend's younger sister. She panicked instantly. Ji-yeon was worried about leaving someone alive on the road and turned the car around to return to the scene. Unexpectedly, she saw Jin-hee at the scene. Ji-yeon was afraid that if Jin-hee saw that she had hit her, it would be over, so she pretended to know nothing and asked Jin-hee what had happened. Ji-yeon learned that the person she had hit was the beloved younger sister, which made her even more scared. She decides to frame Jin-hee for the incident. When she goes to the car to get a towel, she finds the surveillance camera disc. Jin-hee has found evidence to prove that she is not a commercial spy. At this time, the ambulance arrives. Ji-yeon asks Jin-hee to go with the ambulance first. She says she will stay here and wait for the police to come. After the ambulance leaves, Ji-yeon quickly picks up the pieces that fell on the ground. Then she drives the car to the repair shop. She lies that she accidentally hit a utility pole, hoping that the staff would be able to repair it quickly. Ji-yeon tidied everything up before calling the police and Ji-ho, and claiming that Jin-hee had hit Ji-won. Ji-ho couldn't believe it and hurried to the hospital. At the hospital, Jin-hee immediately went to donate blood to save Ji-won, but Ji-yeon was praying in her heart that Ji-won would never wake up. Ji-ho hurried to the hospital. Ji-yeon immediately used her acting skills and asked the nurse to take her blood quickly. Ji-ho asked what was going on. Ji-yeon made up a bunch of lies and deliberately emphasized that Jin-hee had hit Ji-won and caused this. When Jin-hee returned after donating blood, Ji-ho saw the blood on her clothes and immediately asked if she had hit Ji-won and caused this. Jin-hee was puzzled by the question and carefully told Ji-ho about what she had seen from the time she met Ji-won until she arrived at the hospital. She explained that she had found evidence that proved she was not a spy, and that's why she hurried to Ji-won. Ji-ho believed everything Jin-hee said. Soon, the police also arrived at the hospital to investigate Jin-hee. The police took Ji-yeon and Jin-hee to the scene of the incident and questioned them about what happened. During this time, Ji-yeon kept lying. She repeatedly emphasized that Jin-hee was the perpetrator. But when the police questioned Ji-yeon, he noticed her nervous little movements. With years of experience in handling cases, Officer Park knew that this was not a simple matter. Jin-hee's mother didn't want to stay at home as a housewife, and discussed with her husband about finding a job. Ji-yeon had done something wrong and kept having nightmares at night, shouting that she didn't hit herself. She was so scared that she was sweating all over. Ji-won's boyfriend came to the hospital and looked at the unconscious Ji-won. He was so sad. He had tried his best to be a good father and had taken care of everything. Decided to quit the world of crime and live a good life with Ji-won. Never expected expecting something like this to happen, he immediately went to Officer Park and asked him to catch the hit-and-run driver. Officer Park once again went to the scene of the accident to look for clues and accidentally found a chain, and this chain was exactly Ji-Yun's. Ji-Yun also came to the scene to look for it after discovering that the ankle bracelet was missing. Officer Park, who was hiding in the corner, secretly photographed Ji-Yun's actions. Ji-Yun hurriedly left the scene without finding the chain. Officer Park suspects that Ji-Yun must have been involved in the accident. The next day, Ji-Hee gets the news that Ji-Won has woken up. She is happy and wants to show Ji-Won the surveillance disc, but she can't find the disc in her bag. Little does she know that Ji-Yun has already destroyed the disc completely. How can she let Ji-Hee clear her name? Ji-Yun panics when she knows that Ji-Won has woken up. Ji-Won remembers what happened when she woke up. She knew that it was Ji-Yun who hit her and ran away. When her family asked who had caused her to become like this, Ji-Hee, who was by her side, joyfully shook Ji-Won's hand. Ji-Yun happened to appear behind Ji-Hee. Ji-Won saw Ji-Yun and became emotional. Her eyes widened as she wanted to say that Ji-Yun was the murderer. However, this scene made the people present mistakenly believe that Ji-Won was only reacting like this because she saw Ji-Hee. So the stepmother directly asked Ji-Won if Yenhua had hit her like this. Ji-Won wanted to raise her finger to point at Ji-Yun, but Ji-Yun immediately ran up and grabbed Ji-Won's hand that was about to point. She also said that she hoped Ji-Won would get better soon. Ji-Yun deliberately came to provoke Ji-Won to make her injuries worse again, so that she could not tell the truth that she was the culprit. As expected, Ji-Won fainted again in fear as soon as she saw Ji-Yun. At this time, Yuri pointed the finger at Ji-Hee, believing that it was her who grabbed Ji-Won's hand. That made Ji-Won so agitated, and even more convinced that Ji-Hee was the culprit. Yu-Jun on the side also had the same idea. Only Ji-Ho defended Ji-Hee, saying that she was not the culprit. Just then, the person who was harassing Ji-Hee for money came to the hospital to look for her. Ji-Ho took the person who was harassing Ji-Hee away. Ji-Yun saw this as an opportunity and immediately provoked a rift between them. She said that Ji-Hee owed a lot of money to loan sharks and that she had gone to work as a commercial spy in order to pay it back. Ji-Yun's words successfully made Yuri and Yu-Jun hate Ji-Hee, and was even more certain that she was the murderer of Ji-Won. An angry Yuri slapped Ji-Hee directly and told her not to show up here in the future, and that she would be sent to jail as soon as the results of the investigation came out. Ji-Hee really had no way to express her grievances and cried. She also blamed herself for not keeping the evidence that could prove that she was not a spy. Otherwise, the situation would not have become so bad. Fortunately, at this time, Ji-Ho was still willing to believe in her. After Ji-Won's emotions stabilized, she kept shouting baby. She still doesn't know that she has lost her baby. Yu-Jun decides to go out and buy some baby supplies to reassure her, and asks the nurse to take care of Ji-Yun. Ji-Yun takes this opportunity to go to Ji-Won's ward. Ji-Won is confused and remembers Ji-Hee saving her, and shouts Ji-Hee's name. The nurse quickly goes out to look for Ji-Hee, and Ji-Yun, in order to hide her crime, has a murderous intent towards the dying Ji-Won. Ji-Won was scared by Ji-Yun and her eyes widened. She tried to escape from Ji-Yun, the demon, but she accidentally fell off the bed, and the oxygen tube fell off with her. Just as Ji-Won was about to die, Ji-Yun suddenly noticed Ji-Hee rushing over. She hurriedly hid behind the curtain. Ji-Hee came in and saw Ji-Won lying on the ground. She quickly went over to check on her, and noticed that Ji-Won was breathing rapidly. She hastily grabbed the oxygen tube and tried to save Ji-Won, but found that the oxygen tube had broken. Unaware that this action had left her fingerprints on the oxygen tube. In a panic, Ji-Hee ran out of the ward in a panic to find a doctor, while Ji-Yun took the opportunity to escape from the ward. However, the doctor arrived in time, but it was too late for rescue. Ji-Won was ultimately unable to be rescued. Yu-Jun could not believe that he had just gone out for a while and said goodbye to the one he loved. After the funeral, Yu-Jun placed the baby shoes he had bought on Ji-Won's memorial tablet, and vowed in front of Ji-Ho that he would not let the person who killed Ji-Won go. At that time, everyone except Ji-Ho thought that Ji-Hee was the murderer, because her fingerprints were left on the oxygen tube. Ji-Yun thought that this would fool everyone, but she did not expect Officer Park to secretly investigate and collect a lot of evidence against her for causing the accident. He came directly to the company to find Ji-Yun, and showed Ji-Yun the ankle bracelet that had fallen at the scene of the accident. He also took out the button that Ji-Won had dropped in her car after being hit, and simulated the entire process of him hitting Ji-Won in front of Ji-Yun. It was exactly the same as the scene at the time. Faced with the conclusive evidence, Ji-Yun panicked. She thought Ji-Yun was doomed this time. Who knew that Officer Park was not a good person? He went to great lengths to find evidence just to blackmail Ji-Yun, knowing that she could settle this with money. Ji-Yun naturally agreed. Little did she know that she had fallen into an abyss. Officer Park gave Ji-Yun an earring that Ji-Won had left at the crime scene. Ji-Yun took this earring and secretly slipped it into the vehicle driven by Ji-Hee. Under the manipulation of Officer Park and Ji-Yun, the police officer naturally found Ji-Won's earring in the car that Yenhua had driven. However, after technical testing, it was confirmed that the earring was Ji-Won's. At that moment, False reports about Jin-hee spread all over the internet. Ji-ho saw this and urgently called a press conference to try to help Jin-hee clear her name. He told the major media outlets that Jin-hee had nothing to do with her sister's death. Jin-hee was just a witness to the accident at the time and was willing to testify. Jin-hee was very relieved to see Ji-ho vouch for her innocence, but it was already too late. Officer Park came to the press conference after collecting false evidence and arrested Jin-hee as a suspect. Jin-hee was unjustly imprisoned. Ji-ho consulted a lawyer and learned that the fastest way to rescue Jin-hee was to negotiate with the family of the deceased. But Yuri refused to negotiate and said that she would make sure Jin-hee served the full sentence. And Jin-hee also refused to settle because reconciliation means she has admitted her guilt. She insists on proving her innocence and tells Ji-ho that she is willing to go to trial. On the day of the trial, all the evidence points to Jin-hee, although she tries her best to exonerate herself. In the face of the aggressive defense lawyer, Jin-hee is unable to provide evidence to prove her innocence. At this time, the lawyer applies for Ji-yeon to testify in court. Jin-hee looks at Ji-yeon with pleading eyes and secretly prayed in her heart that she would tell the truth. But how could Ji-yeon help her? Ji-yeon identified Jin-hee as the perpetrator. She even fabricated a lot of false evidence. Fortunately, the medical staff on the day of the accident provided testimony that favored Jin-hee. The urgent mood of the ambulance to save people and the positive blood donation all successfully turned the tide for Jin-hee's innocence. Because the evidence was insufficient, the case reached a stalemate. Officer Park took the money Ji-yeon gave him and went to the casino to gamble. He lost everything, but he wasn't panicking. He calmly ate instant noodles. He knew that as long as he had Ji-yeon in his hands, he would never lack for money. Officer Park asked Ji-yeon for 200 million won in hush money. With no other options, Ji-yeon had to confess to her father. She admitted that she was the hit-and-run murderer. She begged her father to save her. Her father finds her actions absurd. Not only did she cause Ji-won's death, but she also framed Jin-hee for the crime. Although her father is very angry, she is his only biological daughter. In order to save Ji-yeon, her father uses his position to personally preside over Jin-hee's trial. Seeing her upright stepfather, Jin-hee is overjoyed. She believes that her innocence will finally be revealed. Little does she know that her false crime will be completely substantiated. Jin-hee's defense lawyer finds the head of the accident appraisal department to testify in court. The officer provided a lot of favorable evidence, proving that there was little possibility of Jin-hee's car colliding with the victim, and even speculating that the car that hit the person might be someone else. After listening to the accident department's testimony, Jin-hee instantly felt relieved. However, at this moment, Officer Park suddenly appeared in court. Ji-yeon was terrified when she saw Officer Park and thought he was here to expose her. Unexpectedly, her father had already approached Officer Park in advance and bribed him. Officer Park provided a lot of evidence to identify Jin-hee as the murderer. Ji-yeon instantly felt relieved, while Jin-hee fell into despair. However, not only did her father settle Officer Park, he also used his personal connections to persuade Jin-hee's defense attorney, Lawyer Min, to stop providing evidence that would benefit Jin-hee. In the end, under her father's manipulation, all the evidence pointed to Jin-hee as the murderer. Her stepfather, mindful of the fact that Jin-hee was his stepdaughter, tried to minimize her crime. In the end, Jin-hee was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Jin-hee could not accept this verdict. It wasn't until the moment she was taken to prison that she finally woke up and realized that it was all Ji-yeon's plot. However, a few days later, Ji-yeon took the initiative to climb into her sister's boyfriend's bed and spent the night with the drunk Ji-ho. Jin-hee originally had another chance to appeal, but her stepfather, in order to protect his biological daughter, kept begging Yeonhwa's defense lawyer to help him. When Jin-hee submitted an appeal application to the lawyer with high hopes, the lawyer told her that the appeal time had already passed. At this point, Jin-hee suddenly realized that the lawyer must have been bribed. Otherwise, he would not have waited until the end of the appeal time to come to her. Jin-hee saw through her stepfather's and Ji-yeon's conspiracy. Subsequently, she was forcibly sent to prison. No matter how hard she struggled and screamed, it was useless. From then on, Jin-hee planted a seed of revenge in her heart. As soon as she arrived in prison, she was provoked by the bully. Jin-hee didn't want to pay any attention to her at all, so the bully came over and grabbed her by the hair and humiliated her. Jin-hee, who could no longer tolerate it, shook her off and grabbed her hair with her free hand. But the bully was not afraid of Jin-hee and directly pushed her to the ground and beat her up. When the fat girl saw this, she quickly called the prison guard, and the bully was forcibly pulled away. From the fat girl's mouth, I learned that the reason why they dare not resist the bully is to be released from prison earlier, because if they fight, both of them will lose points and the chance to reduce their sentence. The bully is a person with nothing to live for, so naturally he doesn't care about this. In order to clear his name and get out of prison early, Jin-hee also decided not to conflict with her anymore, but the bully would never let her go easily. He either threw stones at Jin-hee's legs or grabbed her head and slammed it against the wall. When the fat girl saw this, she clenched her fists, although she really wanted to help Jin-hee. thinking about her imminent release from prison. The fat girl could only call out to the prison guard, and the bully reluctantly stopped. While Jin-hee was being bullied in prison, Yuri used Ji-won's death as an excuse to persuade Lawyer Min to transfer Ji-won's shares to her name. Ji-ho was also in danger of losing his position as president after obtaining Ji-won's shares. Yuri, as the largest shareholder, called a shareholders' meeting and proposed that her son Ji-ho be made president at the meeting. But what Yuri didn't expect was that Ji-yeon's grandmother was also one of the company's shareholders and held as much as 20% of the shares. Ji-yeon's grandmother saw this and decided to help Ji-ho get through this difficult time and take this opportunity to fulfill her granddaughter's wish, on the condition that Ji-ho marry Ji-yeon. With Ji-yeon's grandmother's help, Ji-ho finally won and retained his position as the company's president, and Ji-ho took up the position of director in the company. Ji-ho visits Jin-hee in prison. Jin-hee is overjoyed to see Ji-ho and asks him how he is. However, Ji-ho is indifferent in the face of Jin-hee's urgent concern. He deliberately accuses Jin-hee of being the murderer of his sister, and that she is responsible for the company's current state. Jin-hee is heartbroken and begs Ji-ho to believe her. Ji-ho's eyes are full of compassion, but in the end, he makes a cruel decision. He pretended to be angry and told Jin-hee that they were finished from now on. Jin-hee broke down the moment she heard this. In despair, she was taken back to her cell by the prison guard. After Ji-yeon and Ji-ho agreed on the wedding date, she came to visit Jin-hee and showed off the engagement ring Ji-ho gave her. She warned Jin-hee not to bother Ji-ho anymore in the future, and told her to ask her mother and mentally challenged sister to move out as soon as possible. Hearing this, Jin-hee was not angry, but told Ji-yeon that she would make her pay when she got out of prison. Jin-hee waited until her mother and sister came to visit, and told them about being framed by Ji-yeon and sent to prison. She hoped that her mother and sister would help her gather evidence of the frame-up from the outside. Her mother couldn't believe that such a thing could happen, but she vowed to find evidence for her daughter. That day, Jin-hee discovered that she was 3 months pregnant. She caressed her belly, which had not yet grown, and her heart was filled with mixed emotions. But the father of the child had already married her younger sister, and she was a murderer. So what right did she have to become a mother? Just as she was thinking of giving up the child, the bully in the prison changed his attitude, and not only did he share his rice with Jin-hee, he also comforted her, telling her to take good care of the child in her belly. It turned out that the bully had also gone to prison to protect his own child. After that, she helped Jin-hee with everything, and the prison guards also took good care of her. Jin-hee slowly picked herself up from there. She decided to live a good life for the sake of her child. Ji-ho's life was not easy either. Due to the leak of company secrets, the company's stock price plummeted. Ji-ho, as the company's president, naturally was blamed by a group of shareholders. When the stepmother learned about this, she felt that this was a good opportunity to defeat Ji-ho. Then Yuri remembered the disc in her son's room. At that time, Ji-ho copied a disc after seeing Ji-yeon set Jin-hee up in the surveillance room. However, he has never come forward to help Jin-hee clear her name, so now he feels incredibly guilty. Just as Ji-ho is about to come forward and help Jin-hee prove his innocence, unexpectedly, the disc is switched by his mother. Yuri takes the disc and finds Ji-yeon's grandmother and uses it as a threat to ask her to support Ji-ho's election as president at the shareholders' meeting. The grandmother, in order to cover her granddaughter's crime, has no choice but to cast the crucial vote. In the end, Ji-ho was forced to resign from the position of president. Ji-ho, with the help of his mother, successfully took the position of president. He did not expel Ji-ho from the company out of brotherly love, but invited him to take up the position of minister. When Ji-ho handed the disc to the prosecutor, he discovered that it was empty. He thought there had been a mistake when it was copied. At this time, Ji-ho was in a state of confusion. He really wanted to help Jin-hee but didn't know how, so he wrote a letter to Jin-hee in Jack's name. The content was, "I'm willing to believe you're innocent." Although it was a short sentence, it gave Jin-hee a lot of strength, because there was someone who was willing to believe in her. Over time, the two of them kept in frequent contact through letters. Because of Jack's support and trust, Jin-hee opened up to him and told him about her grievances. Ji-ho learned from Jin-hee's letters about what she had been through, and he felt even more guilty. Slowly, he developed feelings for Jin-hee. After receiving the news that a poetry reading would be held in prison, Ji-ho couldn't help but miss her. He secretly ran to see Jin-hee, and felt very distressed at the thought of Jin-hee being unjustly imprisoned. Ji-ho feels pain because he failed to protect the company, and can't help but recall the past with Jin-hee. He even mistakes Ji-yeon for Jin-hee. Facing such Ji-ho, Ji-yeon is determined to get him back to the company, and make Ji-ho forget Jin-hee completely. Unable to bear the condemnation of his conscience, the stepfather decides to resign from the position of judge. Unexpectedly, at this time, he learned that he would be promoted to the president of the High Court, so he gave up the idea of resigning. Ji-yeon's grandmother was thinking about what to do with the disc when Suya suddenly entered the room and saw the disc in her grandmother's hand. She remembered that her sister had been looking for the disc before, and decided that this was the surveillance video that her sister had been looking for but couldn't find, so she decided to find a way to get the disc to her sister. That night, Jin-hee suddenly had unbearable abdominal pain. Her cellmates were awakened by her screams. They immediately called the prison guards. They wanted to help Jin-hee get up and go to the hospital, but her water had broken, and the pain from the contractions made it impossible for her to move her body. There was nothing else they could do but urgently contact the nearby obstetrician. The doctor quickly arrived and was ready to help Jin-hee give birth, since she had already used up too much energy before. Jin-hee fainted halfway through the birth. The doctor was extremely anxious when he saw this. If the delay continued, she would likely lose her life. Just then, Jin-hee saw her mother and sister by her side in a daze. Jin-hee told herself not to give up, and with a strong will, she opened her tired eyes again, and finally gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Jin-hee named him Sun, and Ji-ho also sensed something in the dark. Anxious, he went to the detention center the next day to see Jin-hee, but Jin-hee was very weak after giving birth, and she didn't want Ji-ho to know about the baby, so she refused to meet him. Jin-hee's mother was also trying hard to recover. For her daughter, she used her newly recovered hand to write down Ji-yeon's crimes with great difficulty, and asked the nursing assistant to help her deliver the note to the TV station, so that everyone could see Ji-yeon's true face. But the nursing assistant found the content terrifying, and then gave the note to Ji-yeon's father. Ji-yeon's father saw this and immediately took his wife home to care for her, so that she would not tell everyone about it. Ji-yeon was furious when she saw her father bring her stepmother back, and asked her father why he had brought her back. Her father then showed her the note from her stepmother. Ji-yeon trembled with fear after reading it. Suya was so excited to see her mother that she immediately threw her arms around her. The mother and daughter cried and hugged. After pouring out her heart to her mother, Suya told her about the DVD she had found in her grandmother's room. After learning about it, her mother vowed to help her daughter clear her name as a spy, so the mother and daughter took advantage of the fact that no one else was home, went to grandma's room, and found the disc in the safe. Then the mother wrote down their birthdays and anniversaries, and asked Suya to try them one after the other, and finally managed to open the safe and get the disc. After checking it, the mother found that the disc really recorded evidence that Ji-yeon framed Jin-hee as a commercial spy. She could not forgive her husband and stepdaughter for what they had done, so her mother took the disc and planned to go to the company to tell Ji-ho the truth. When her grandmother returned, she saw that the room had been turned upside down and thought that she had been burgled. After checking the safe, she realized that only the disc was missing. She guessed that Jin-hee's mother must have taken it, so she immediately called Ji-yeon. Ji-yeon didn't expect there to be a backup disc. She guessed that the biggest possibility was that her stepmother had gotten the disc and gone to Ji-ho. If Ji-ho knew, her life would be over. Ji-yeon absolutely couldn't let that happen. Suya called Ji-ho from a public phone, but Ji-ho didn't answer unfamiliar numbers. Unable to reach Ji-ho, Suya was extremely anxious. She had no choice but to go to the post office and send a letter to her sister. Jin-hee's mother was waiting for her daughter at the door. When Ji-yeon arrived, Ji-yeon pretended to tell her stepmother that she had made a mistake and would turn herself in to get Jin-hee released. She asked her stepmother not to make a scene in a crowded place. Jin-hee's mother didn't believe her at all, but Ji-yeon didn't care. She forcibly took her disabled stepmother away. Suya came out but didn't see her mother's figure. She only picked up her mother's walking stick on the roadside. Ji-yeon took her stepmother to a cliff in the middle of nowhere, while the two were fighting over the bag. Jin-hee's mother accidentally lost her footing and fell off the cliff. At this critical moment, Ji-yeon tightly grasped her stepmother's hand, but she was only thinking about getting the disc, so she let go and abandoned her stepmother. Ji-yeon, who had once again caused a major disaster, trembled with fear. Meanwhile, Jin-hee, who was in prison, had just received a letter from her mother. Learning that her mother is coming to see her, Jin-hee is overjoyed and wants to bring the son to show her mother. However, her mother's life is still in danger. Ji-yeon once again fails to call an ambulance in time, and instead abandons her stepmother and flees the scene. She rushes back home and runs to her stepmother's room. She takes out a notebook from the drawer and tears out a piece of paper. Using her left hand, she imitates her stepmother's handwriting and forges a suicide note before her death. She then places the note on the bedside table. When her father came home that night, he immediately noticed the note on the bedside table. He was shocked to read the contents. He was afraid that his wife might have done something to harm them, so he immediately called the police. Ji-yeon pretended to be calm, but she was terrified inside. Fortunately, her stepmother was discovered by hikers and sent to the hospital in time. Ji-yeon returned to Ji-ho's house in a daze. Her mother-in-law scolded her for coming home so late. At that moment, the phone in the living room suddenly rang. Ji-yeon was so scared that she didn't know what to do. Yuri asked her if she had done something wrong. Jin-hee was anxious because her mother and sister were late. She worried that something had happened to them. Just then, the prison guard came in and told Jin-hee that her mother had an accident. She is now in the hospital and is unconscious. Although she was rescued, her brain was severely damaged and she became a vegetable. If her condition worsens, she may eventually become brain dead. Jin-hee was devastated by the news. She couldn't believe that her mother, who was in perfect health, had become like this. In order to go out and see her mother, Jin-hee went to the prison warden and asked for a special pardon. She wanted to go out and see her mother, who was in danger, because Jinhee had not served more than one-third of her sentence, and had a record of escaping from prison. They refused Jinhee's request. Jinhee had no choice but to kneel down and beg them desperately, but she received no sympathy. Jinhee did not give up, but asked the prison guard to help her. The prison guard was also very sympathetic to Jinhee, so she personally guaranteed her reputation, and fought for Jinhee to go out for a day. At the same time, the nurse gave Suya her mother's bag. Suya knew that this was something that could help her sister and could not be discovered by others. She hugged the bag and tried to find a safe place to hide it, but this scene happened to be seen by Ji-yeon, who came. Ji-yeon gave chase without saying a word. Eventually, she cornered Suya in the bathroom. Ji-yeon went straight for the bag in Suya's hands. Suya put up a fierce fight, but Ji-yeon managed to snatch the bag from her. Ji-yeon took the disc in the bag. Meanwhile, Jinhee, who had just been released from prison, arrived at the hospital accompanied by a prison guard. She saw her mother lying on the hospital bed, inconsolable, crying and screaming, hoping that her mother would wake up and tell her what had happened. At that moment, the doctor came in and told Jinhee that there was very little chance that her mother would recover, and that she might not last a month or two. Seeing her stepfather, Jinhee immediately questioned him about why her mother had become like this. Her stepfather said that her mother had written a suicide note before the accident. Jinhee did not believe that her mother would commit suicide. She wanted to go find her younger sister to find out what had happened, so she asked her stepfather where Suya was. Ji-yeon saw Jinhee and hurriedly hid behind the door. She didn't think that Jinhee would be able to come to the hospital. However, Jinhee looked all over but couldn't see her sister's figure, but the time she was allowed to go out was about to end. The prison guard told Jinhee that she had to go back immediately, or else she would be considered escaping from prison again. Jinhee had no choice but to bid farewell to her mother on the hospital bed, and just as she was about to go back, Suya ran over and shouted, "Sister!" She told her about the incident where she and her mother saw the DVD, and it had captured Ji-yeon's entire process. Jinhee learned the truth, but now she must hurry back. She told Suya to take good care of her mother. The scene of the two sisters reluctantly parting was seen by Ji-ho in the distance. He couldn't help but feel heartbroken at what had happened to Jinhee. After returning home, Ji-ho asked his mother depressedly, "What should you do to comfort someone who is heartbroken?" But his mother didn't give him a clear answer. Ji-yeon panicked when she found out that Jinhee had given birth. She was afraid that if her husband found out about this, he would definitely return to his sister's side for the sake of the child. Then their nominal marital relationship would also come to an end. Ji-yeon vowed to bear her husband a child to keep him by her side. After taking a bath at night, Ji-yeon eagerly came to Ji-ho's side, but Ji-ho had no feelings for her, let alone bear a child. If it weren't for the sake of keeping the company, he would never have married Ji-yeon in the first place. Ji-yeon looked at her husband's indifferent attitude towards her and she was about to go crazy. Jinhee asked the fat girl to go to the hospital to find out about her mother's condition. Unexpectedly, Ji-ho also came to the hospital at this time. Ji-ho lied that she was Jinhee's friend visiting her mother in the name of Jack. Jinhee was incredulous to learn that Jack had visited her mother. This made her curious about who Jack really was. From time to time, Jack would come to the hospital to help take care of Jinhee's mother. He would also tell Jinhee about her mother and Suya, so that she wouldn't worry. This also made Jinhee very grateful. Thanks to the existence of the son, Jinhee's days in prison were not so hard, but the happy days did not last long. She had to face a cruel problem again. The child will be sent out of prison after 18 months. Jinhee still does not know who to entrust the child to. Her mother and sister are definitely unable to help her take care of the child in their current situation. Instead of sending the son to be taken care of by someone she doesn't know, a prison cellmate suggested that she send the child to his father. Jinhee felt that this was not appropriate. Once Ji-yeon found out, it would be over. There was no other way. So Jinhee reluctantly sent her son to the welfare institution. The thought that she would have to part with her son the next day made her heart ache. Jinhee wished that time would stop at that moment, and that her son would stay by her side forever. As she fed son his meal, he accidentally spilled the soup on his feet. He cried in pain. The day passed quickly. Although she was reluctant to part with her son, Jinhee could only accept this cruel reality. She wrote down everything that son liked to eat and play with on a piece of paper, hoping that whoever raises son will treat him well. At this time, Ji-yeon is struggling to have a child. Since Ji-ho is unwilling to have sex with her, she has no choice but to ask her grandmother to intervene and persuade Ji-ho to have an IVF with her. But Ji-ho has no intention of having a child at all, and directly rejected her grandmother's request, thinking that her grandmother will definitely succeed if she intervenes. Ji-yeon arrived at the hospital early to wait, but Ji-ho never showed up. Ji-yeon's hatred surged up in her heart at the thought of Jinhee giving birth to her husband's child, so she started asking around about the child's whereabouts, and learned that the child would be sent to an orphanage the next day. Ji-yeon had a terrible thought in her heart. Early the next morning, Jinhee put the necklace Ji-ho gave her on Sun. It was the only thing she could give the child. Then the prison guard took Sun and prepared to send him to the orphanage. Jinhee held back her tears and comforted Sun. The prison guard took the child to the orphanage. Unexpectedly, Ji-yeon also appeared here. She came to the Welfare Institute and, under the guise of adopting a child, looked through the children's information, and quickly found Jinhee's child's information. At this time, the director had gone out because of something. Ji-yeon took this opportunity to switch the photos of Sun and another child. Then she found a couple and successfully adopted Jinhee's child. Ji-yeon did this because she was afraid that her husband would find out about the child's existence and affect her happiness. She gave the couple a large sum of living expenses and asked them to raise the child. Time flies. 4 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Jinhee can be released early from prison because of her good behavior. Upon hearing the news, she is ecstatic. She hugs the prison guard and cries with joy. After 5 years of suffering unjustly, she can finally regain her freedom. Ji-ho immediately goes to the mall to buy her a set of clothes after hearing the news. Jinhee puts on the red coat that Jack gave her and slowly steps out of the prison gate, feeling the fresh air outside. Her path of revenge begins at this moment. She secretly vowed that she would make her stepfather and his family pay for what they had done. The first thing Jinhee did after getting out of prison was to visit Ji-won. She happened to run into Ji-ho, who looked dejected. Ji-ho was very surprised to see Jinhee. She questioned her right to be there. Jinhee didn't want to say much. She just asked Ji-ho if she really didn't want to believe her. Ji-ho felt that at this point, whether she believed her or not was no longer important. Jinhee continued to ask Ji-yeon if she had married to protect the company. Ji-ho did not directly answer her question, but told Jinhee that no matter what the reason was, he would never return to Jinhee. Ji-ho's words completely crushed Jinhee's last hope. Jinhee swore to Ji-won's photo that she would uncover the truth and clear her name. Jinhee arrived at the orphanage where her son was, to take him out of there, but when the staff brought the child over, Jinhee recognized at once that this was not her son. She went over to examine the child's back and feet. It was hard for her to accept the truth. After hearing this, the director quickly retrieved the information on Sun's admission, and sure enough, she found that Sun's photo was different from the one in the file. Jinhee was about to collapse. Her long-cherished son had disappeared. She fell to her knees in front of the police and the director, hoping they could help her find her son. The police officer reassured her that fortunately, the adoption records from that year were still available, and they would definitely help her find her son. Jinhee's emotions eased a little. Just then, the swapped boy walked in, begging Jinhee to be her mother. Jinhee's heart was torn apart. She hugged the child and kept apologizing. After the two of them left the Welfare Institute, Jinhee temporarily entrusted the search for Sun to the fat girl, because she still had to go to one place. Grandma Ji-yeon heard the phone ringing, picked up the phone and heard Jinhee's voice. So she was so scared that she dropped the phone. Suya was overjoyed to learn that it was her sister who had come, and quickly opened the door for her. Grandma looked at Jinhee, who was slowly walking in, and was terrified. She asked Jinhee what deep hatred she had against their family. Jinhee didn't pay any attention to this old woman. Instead, she went straight to the room with her sister to see their mother, but their mother was now in a vegetative state. No matter what Jinhee said, their mother was unable to respond to her. Jinhee's stepfather arrived at home soon after learning that she had been released from prison. Feeling guilty, he said that he was willing to compensate Jinhee in any way he could. Jinhee asked him to restore her lost life to the way it was. The stepfather was speechless after hearing this. After all, they were the ones who caused it. Before Jinhee left, she told Suya to write down everything she heard in the family and pass it on to her. Grandma Ji-yeon was also busy, and immediately told Ji-yeon about Jinhee's release from prison. Ji-yeon was shocked and at a loss for words, and then she had a wicked idea about Yen-hwa, and tried to send her to prison again. Ji-yeon called Jinhee to meet her at the company. As soon as the two met, she deliberately broke the cup, and then pretended to scream in horror. The secretary who heard the noise was slapping on the door outside, and seeing the scene in front of her, Jinhee knew she had fallen into Ji-yeon's trap. Because she is on parole, she cannot get into trouble, or she will be sent to prison again. Jinhee tries to leave this place of trouble, but Ji-yeon blocks her at the door. Ji-yeon shouts for help. The security guard immediately opens the door. Ji-yeon accuses Jinhee of trying to harm her, and asks someone to call the police. A large crowd of reporters swarms in, putting Jinhee in an instant of trouble. Ji-ho arrives at this time, and saw Ji-yeon's injured hand. Ji-yeon pretended to be scared again and fell into Ji-ho's arms. Ji-ho mistakenly thought that Jinhee had done it, and defended Ji-yeon, leaving the scene. After making a generous statement in front of the reporters, Jinhee was forcibly taken out of the company by the security guards. When the security guards asked Ji-ho if they should take Jinhee to the police station, Ji-ho said no. Hearing this, Ji-yeon instantly became unhappy, but she never had a say in front of Ji-ho. Ji-yeon was furious that her plan had failed and she slapped her assistant directly, blaming her for not calling the police in time, and fired the assistant on the spot. Jinhee, who had been kicked out, was about to leave the company when she happened to bump into Ji-ho. Ji-ho immediately went up to greet her, but Jinhee fainted on the spot due to the shock. Ji-ho took her to the hospital for treatment. Seeing Jinhee, who was still crying in her sleep, made Ji-ho feel very distressed. He immediately called his secretary to ask what happened at the company today. Ji-ho on the other side was heartbroken to see Jinhee in pain. He warned Ji-yeon that if she was involved in her sister's death, then they would both not be able to live. Ji-yeon quickly denied that she had absolutely nothing to do with the incident. After that, She hugged Ji-ho. When Ji-ho was too drunk to notice, Ji-yeon took this opportunity to have sex with Ji-ho. When she woke up the next day, Ji-yeon prayed to God to give them a child. Jin-hee is temporarily living with the fat girl. Jack also gave her a mobile phone. The most urgent task now is to find her son, but a lot of money is needed. Jin-hee, who has just been released from prison, has no savings. She can only find a stable job. Just as the fat girl searches for job listings on the internet, she discovers that Jin-hee has already been trending on the internet because of Ji-yeon cutting her wrists, and her imprisonment and escape for murder 5 years ago were all exposed. Now the whole country knows that Jin-hee has a criminal record, which is very bad for her job search. With no choice, Jin-hee had to first find out where her child is. She went to the Welfare Institute and found the address of the adoptive couple who adopted the child at that time, but when Jin-hee arrived at that place, there was no trace of them. She went to the management bureau to inquire and learned that the adoptive couple had bad credit and no resident registration. If the couple does not come forward to report, the administration would be unable to locate them, which made Jin-hee's search for her child even more difficult. Just then, she saw a happy mother and child in the distance. Jin-hee thought her child should be about the same age as that child. However, what she didn't expect was that the child was actually the son. In this way, she missed her son, and that child saw Ji-yeon and ran over happily to throw herself into her arms. Ji-yeon had been supporting the couple since they adopted the child. In order to prevent her sister from finding her son, Ji-yeon directly offered 500 million won to get rid of her sister, and asked her to take her mother and younger sister and leave this place, to find a place to live quietly. Facing this opportunity that came knocking at the door, Jin-hee gave a strange smile and directly accepted Ji-yeon's 500 million won, and even said that this amount of money was not enough. She had suffered 5 years in prison, and there were so many things she wanted to do but didn't get to do. Her younger sister was getting married and her mother needed medical treatment. Now that she was in a bad situation, it was hard for her to find a job, and hoped that Ji-yeon would go to her father again to ask for some money, so that she would consider leaving. Hearing that Jin-hee was willing to leave here for money, Ji-yeon decisively agreed. Little did she know that she had already fallen into the trap that Jin-hee had set. Ji-yeon went back and immediately explained the situation to her father. Although her father felt that Jin-hee had agreed too readily, in order to remove her as a stumbling block, he also contributed 500 million won to Jin-hee. Jin-hee took the money without a second thought, but she felt that it wasn't enough, so she asked her stepfather for more compensation, and wrote down her bank account number, asking him to transfer some more money. Her stepfather couldn't believe how Jin-hee had changed, but in order to hide his crime, he transferred the money to Jin-hee's account. Jin-hee was furious when she received the money. How could a measly billion restore her lost life? She then went to the company and found Ji-ho, and placed the huge sum of 1 billion in front of him, and said that it was given to him by his father-in-law and wife, and that they could ask them personally why they gave so much money. But Ji-ho acted like he didn't care, and he didn't want Jin-hee to infringe on his life. Jin-hee bluntly said that he was afraid, and after hearing this, Ji-ho already had doubts in his heart. That night, he brought the passbook to Ji-yeon's house, and directly questioned them why they gave Jin-hee so much money. This sudden change of events made Ji-yeon panic. Just as Ji-yeon was trying to think of a lie to tell, Jin-hee suddenly burst in. She wanted to confront her about this issue face to face, in order to cover up her crime. Ji-yeon lied that she had given the money to Yeonhwa out of concern for her sister. Although they were not related by blood, they had lived together briefly after all. Jin-hee felt ridiculous upon hearing this false statement, and her stepfather shamelessly claimed that the money was for Jin-hee to buy a house. Facing the two of them's forced sophistry, Jin-hee's situation instantly became passive. She had originally wanted to give her stepfather a chance, but her stepfather's attitude completely disappointed Jin-hee. Jin-hee warned her stepfather that she would make him lose everything in the end. Ji-yeon, in order to convince Ji-ho of her innocence, pulled him back to Jin-hee's mother's house, to show him how meticulously they took care of Jin-hee's mom, and that Jin-hee had gone too far by causing trouble here. Ji-ho immediately came out and scolded Jin-hee for what she had done. Facing Ji-ho's accusations, Jin-hee directly told Ji-yeon that she was the one who framed her as a business spy. Ji-ho looked at the panicked Ji-yeon with disbelief. Ji-yeon still tried to argue. Suya said she saw the content of the disc, and that Ji-yeon had entered her sister's workplace and destroyed the disc. Jin-hee then said that Ji-yeon had framed her as the culprit. They even colluded to rig the trial. Ji-yeon's grandmother immediately threw things at Jin-hee's head after hearing this, but Jin-hee was not angry, because this family was already feeling guilty. The stepfather even accused Jin-hee of losing her humanity after spending so much time in prison. "We've offered your mother and sister a place to stay. I can't believe you're still here talking nonsense." In order to prevent the crime from being exposed, the stepfather asked Ji-ho to drink with him. Jin-hee, on the other hand, apologized to her mother. She didn't want her mother and sister to live in an inhumane home. She would find a way to get them out quickly. Facing Ji-ho's questioning, although the father-in-law denied everything, Ji-ho no longer believed Ji-yeon. He felt that there was no way he could live with Ji-yeon, so he packed his bags and angrily left the house. And this scene was also seen by Yuri. She immediately accused Ji-yeon of being the one to leave the house. Jin-hee went to a roadside stand with the fat girl to drink, and told her what had just happened. The fat girl was also angry at Ji-yeon's viciousness. However, Ji-ho pretended to pass by and greeted them. At this time, Jin-hee did not know that this Ji-ho was Jack, who had always helped her. When she saw Ji-ho, her former colleague, Jin-hee suddenly remembered that when she was framed as a commercial spy, she wanted to seek his help, but he ruthlessly refused. Jin-hee felt that Ji-ho could not be helped because he was unwilling to help her at that time, and angrily scolded him on the spot. Why did he stand by and do nothing? She hated this kind of self-righteous person the most. The fat girl tried to tell Jin-hee about Jack, but Ji-ho stopped her. Ji-ho sincerely apologized to Jin-hee. Jin-hee ended up getting drunk. The fat girl couldn't understand why Ji-ho wouldn't tell her about Jack. It turned out that Ji-ho wanted to reveal his true identity to Jin-hee. Early the next morning, Jack sent Jin-hee a lot of clothes for work. He encouraged her to cheer up and spread her wings. Jin-hee was curious about what kind of person Jack really was, and wanted to meet him in person to thank him. That day, Jin-hee suddenly realized that the little boy in front of her looked a lot like her child. She couldn't help but want to look at the boy's back to see if there was a birthmark. The customer was very angry at Jin-hee's actions, but Jin-hee was still undaunted. She asked the customer if she had seen a necklace when she adopted the child. The customer thought she was crazy. Angrily, she pushed Jin-hee away, but Jin-hee was convinced that this child was her son, so the two mothers started to fight. The boy was so scared that he started to cry. Jin-hee saw this and lovingly hugged the child to comfort him. The woman saw this and forcibly took her son away. Jin-hee quickly grabbed the woman and asked where their home address was. The woman, who was forced, directly pushed Jin-hee down. The food also spilled all over her. Soon the police arrived at the restaurant. The proprietress said that Jin-hee was just a crazy person. After Jin-hee reported her ID number, the police found that she had been imprisoned for murder and had just been released. They accused her of causing trouble while on parole. Jin-hee said that she had only become so agitated because her son had disappeared. Now she knew she was in the wrong, and kept saying sorry to the woman over and over again. The woman, who was also a mother, seeing Jin-hee's pitiful appearance, chose to forgive her. After returning home, Jin-hee asked the people in the community to intensify their search for her son. She then went with the fat woman to the police station to request a re-investigation of the 5-year-old traffic accident. She had been wrongly imprisoned due to a faulty police investigation. The police said that a large amount of evidence was required to reopen the investigation. Although it was difficult, Jin-hee vowed to find the evidence. Having lost her job, she now had to find a new one. Jin-hee was very capable in every way. However, as soon as they heard that she had been imprisoned, they rejected her. Some interviewers even directly humiliated her in public after reading her resume. No matter how Jin-hee explained that she had been framed, the interviewers would not listen, and called the security guard to throw him out. Ji-ho saw the scene, and went to Yoo-jun to ask him to hire Jin-hee. But Yoo-jun has always been haunted by Ji-won's death. He always believes that it was Jin-hee who killed Ji-won. The reason Ji-ho did this was to let Yoo-jun get to know Jin-hee better, and then observe with all his heart whether she is innocent or not. This can not only open his heart and clear Jin-hee's name. Yoo-jun thought this was a good suggestion and agreed to Ji-ho's request. Ji-ho accidentally learned that Ji-ho had asked Yoo-jun to help Jin-hee find a job. He was worried that Yoo-jun would retaliate against Jin-hee because of Ji-won, and strongly opposed Yoo-jun hiring Jin-hee. Yoo-jun mocked Ji-ho for being nothing and not qualified to stop. Jin-hee successfully joined Yoo-jun's communications company with Ji-ho's help, but she didn't know that her boss was Yoo-jun. In order to find her son as soon as possible, and to prove her innocence and achieve her revenge plan, Jin-hee worked twice as hard as normal people, and she persevered despite the setbacks. Ji-ho deliberately squeezed apple juice and gave it to her, and apologized to her again for what happened last time. Jin-hee is not the kind of person who is petty. Ji-ho was a little angry to see the two getting along so well. He came over and took Jin-hee away directly. He said he would give her some money, and asked Jin-hee to quit this job immediately. Jin-hee just felt that Ji-ho was pitying her. She just wanted to work here, and use the money she earned to clear her injustice. Ji-ho would help find out the truth no matter what it was. Jin-hee was very surprised after hearing this. She laughed at Ji-ho and asked when he started caring about the truth. The two of them just had a fight and parted ways in discord. But Ji-ho began investigating the business espionage incident 5 years ago. After inquiring at the surveillance room, he learned that Ji-ho had watched the surveillance video, so he wanted to ask Ji-ho for clarification. Although Ji-ho didn't say it out loud, Ji-ho was already certain that it was Ji-yeon who did it, because all the clues pointed to her. Ji-ho directly questioned Ji-yeon why she wanted to frame Jin-hee. Ji-yeon said that if Ji-ho didn't believe her, she would fall into Jin-hee's trap. Ji-ho couldn't stand Ji-yeon's attitude of arguing even when she was wrong, and immediately proposed a divorce. Ji-yeon refused to accept it, saying why divorce for Jin-hee, and there was no evidence to prove that she did it. Ji-ho didn't want to continue talking to her and insisted on a divorce. Ji-yeon blamed it all on her sister, and ran to her sister's workplace like a madwoman. Without saying a word, She knocked over everything on Jin Hee's workbench, and then grabbed Jin Hee by the collar, and told her with clenched teeth not to be too happy, as she would definitely protect her family. Jin Hee sneered and said that she had obtained her marriage through framing, and that even if it broke up, it wasn't unjustified. These words completely drove Ji-yeon out of her mind, and she yelled again. She fainted in Jin Hee's arms due to her emotional outburst. Although Ji-yeon was hateful, the kind-hearted Jin Hee still took her to the hospital for a checkup. Just as Jin Hee was about to leave, she heard the doctor say that Ji-yeon was pregnant. Ji-yeon couldn't believe it, because she had a constitution that made it extremely difficult to get pregnant. She was about to get a divorce, and now she was suspicious. But that was a good thing. This made Ji-yeon extremely happy. Jin Hee bumped into Ji-ho on her way out and told him about Ji-yeon's pregnancy. Ji-ho was shocked to hear the news. He had never had sex with Ji-yeon before he could think about it. He was dragged to the hospital room by his father-in-law and the rest of the family. Everyone was happy that Ji-yeon was pregnant. Ji-ho, however, had a painful expression on his face. His father knelt down and begged Ji-ho not to divorce Ji-yeon for the sake of their daughter, even if it was for the sake of the baby. Forgive her once. Ji-ho finally relented. Jin Hee also remembered her lost son because of Ji-yeon's pregnancy, and couldn't help but burst into tears. Ji-yeon became arrogant with the support of her child, and began to order her husband around with arrogance. Ji-yeon's words made Ji-ho feel very uncomfortable, but he endured it for the sake of the child. That day, Ji-yeon accidentally heard Ji-ho ask Jin Hee to go to the restaurant downstairs for dinner. She immediately ran to Ji-ho's office and asked Ji-ho to put down what he was doing and take her to dinner, and deliberately emphasized that it was the child in her stomach that wanted to eat. Ji-ho had no choice but to accompany her. As a result, when they arrived at the restaurant Ji-yeon had specified, they saw Jin Hee and Ji-ho. Ji-ho's face suddenly turned a little embarrassed, but Ji-yeon pretended not to see Jin Hee, and then forced Ji-ho to show off their affection in front of Jin Hee. Just then, Ji-yeon's phone rang. As she was about to go out to answer it, she gave a smug expression. Ji-ho was not stupid. He guessed that Ji-yeon had deliberately brought her here. He left angrily. When Ji-yeon returned and didn't see her husband, she panicked. She immediately ran home and knelt in front of her husband. Ji-ho questioned her why she deliberately went to the restaurant where Jin Hee was. Ji-yeon hurriedly explained that she did it because she loved him so much, so she wanted to prove to him whether he still had feelings for Jin Hee or not, and used the baby as an excuse, hoping that her husband would forgive her for the sake of the baby. But this time Ji-ho did not indulge her. From now on they would live together with a sense of responsibility towards the baby. There are many couples who live like this. Don't expect any affection or love from him. Ji-ho will live with a sense of responsibility towards the baby. After saying that, he slammed the door and left. The next day he took the initiative to find Jin Hee, apologized for setting Jin Hee up for Ji-yeon, and hoped that Jin Hee would let go of all grudges for the sake of the child. Hearing this made Jin Hee feel disheartened about Ji-ho. The pain and blows she has suffered over the years, how could they be dispelled because of the child between them? Jin Hee directly and angrily told Ji-ho that she would live a different life in the future, and Ji-ho will live with regret from this moment on. Jin Hee is not only highly capable but also has strong sales skills, but on her first day at work, she was ostracized by her colleagues, who deliberately wet her documents with coffee and wrote the word murderer on her desk with lipstick. The reason they treated Jin Hee this way was because there were many defamatory messages about her on the company's website, spreading that she was a murderer and a business spy. Jin Hee commissioned the Internet Police Department to track it down, and it turned out that Ji-yeon was behind it again. Jin Hee barged directly into Ji-yeon's office to warn her not to do such things again. Does she not know that these bad intentions will be instilled in the child? If you cherish the child in your belly, you should do more good deeds. Jin Hee finished speaking and left, without giving Ji-yeon a chance to speak. Ji-yeon was so angry that she almost died where she stood. In order to stay in the company, Jin Hee had to work harder than everyone else. After her long-term hard work, her colleagues recognized her. Soon she became the best in the company. Ji-ho can be said to be Jin Hee's life's precious guest, always silently protecting her from behind. Jin Hee only found out at a company party that her boss was Yoo Jun, which surprised her greatly. The company manager proposed that new employees answer 20 questions truthfully. When they asked Jin Hee why she had been in prison, Yoo Jun took the opportunity to ask Jin Hee if she had been in prison for murder. Jin Hee quickly denied that she had never killed anyone, but had been framed and sent to prison. The atmosphere became awkward instantly. Jin Hee couldn't stand Yoo Jun's scrutinizing gaze and hurriedly ran out of the restaurant. Yoo Jun also ran out and forced Jin Hee against the iron bars, and questioned her why she was so afraid of him. Jin Hee didn't understand why Yoo Jun had hired her in the first place. Looking at Yoo Jun's menacing gaze, Jin Hee was panic-stricken inside, blinded by hatred. Yoo Jun even wanted to take that kind of revenge on Jin Hee. Fortunately, Ji-ho arrived in time and knocked Yoo Jun to the ground with a punch, successfully helping Jin Hee out of the situation. The next day Jin Hee was worried that Yoo Jun would feel bad if he saw her, so she took the initiative to submit her resignation. Yoo Jun thought this was a sign of guilt. If she was innocent, she shouldn't be afraid enough to resign. Yoo Jun deliberately used this provocation to provoke Jin Hee. Unexpectedly, This method was quite effective. Jin Hee decided to prove her innocence and dismissed the idea of resigning. From then on, Jin Hee decided to show Yoo Jun her sincerity, and every day, she would provide Yoo Jun with a creative proposal. At first, Yoo Jun simply didn't read them and threw them aside. Jin Hee stayed up late every day thinking of ideas and working hard. Yoo Jun told her not to waste her time. He simply would not read them. Jin Hee said that this was a method Ji-won had trained her in. Yoo Jun couldn't help but read the ideas Jin Hee proposed. They felt very good, and decided to let her be in charge of the TV project, as the host to promote the new product. Ji-yeon was very unhappy when she learned that Jin Hee was going to host the TV shopping. On the day of the live TV shopping, Ji-yeon started to cause trouble again, while Jin Hee was practicing the script. She deliberately knocked over the props nearby to attract Jin Hee's attention. Seeing that Jin Hee put the script on the cabinet, she secretly took it away when no one was paying attention. Jin Hee was very anxious because she couldn't find the script. Yoo Jun learned that Yeonhwa had lost the script and scolded her. Now there are only 30 seconds left before going on stage. There was no way out, so Jin Hee had to go on. Ji-yeon looked on with interest. Jin Hee finally calmed her nerves. Officer Park came to cause trouble again. She saw the other person start to daydream, standing on the stage. Her mind went blank. Ji-ho immediately came to help. Encouraged by Ji-ho, Jin Hee regained her confident smile. Ji-ho, who was standing nearby, was also cheering for her from the bottom of her heart. After Jin Hee's deeply moving speech, the audience loved her. The order also went from 0 to directly breaking 100, breaking the company's sales record. Ji-yeon, who was standing nearby, couldn't help but grind her teeth in anger, and when she saw Ji-ho happily hugging Jin Hee to celebrate, Ji-ho's mood also became a little complicated. When it was Ji-yeon's turn to record the video, Jin Hee also came to the studio to watch. When Ji-yeon saw Jin Hee, her heart also became restless. At that moment, Ji-yeon's phone rang. Ji-ho accidentally found Jin Hee's script in Ji-yeon's bag. Jin Hee immediately understood Ji-yeon's trick when she saw the script. She snatched the script from Ji-ho and held it above her head on purpose. Ji-yeon was nervous when she saw that her trick had been revealed. She was so scared that she knocked over the product she was promoting. Yuri is incredulous when she sees this. How much revenue has she cost the company? Jin Hee holds up the foot essence and interrogates Ji-yeon, but Ji-yeon still denies it. Ji-ho can't bear to watch anymore and gets angry and leaves directly. Jin Hee thanks Ji-ho for his help today, and then asks if he also works here. Ji-ho doesn't want to reveal his identity, so he has to say yes. Ji-yeon plans to keep Ji-ho by her side, plans to help him regain his position as the CEO. Jin Hee's involvement in the business espionage plot has been exposed. Yuri no longer has any leverage over her grandmother. Ji-yeon asks her grandmother to help Ji-ho regain his position as the CEO. Soon, the grandmother brings the major shareholders back to the house to discuss the matter. Yuri immediately rushes over after hearing the news. They are unable to continue the discussion. Yuri knows that her grandmother wants Ji-ho to replace her son. How could she let these people get their way? In order to undermine her grandmother's trust in Ji-ho, Yuri came up with a plan. She called Jin Hee to meet and talk about something important. Then she sent a message to Ji-ho in Jin Hee's name. But at this time, Ji-yeon happened to ask Ji-ho to take him out for a drive. After receiving Jin Hee's message, Ji-ho left Ji-yeon and ran out. Ji-yeon felt something was wrong and secretly followed him. Ji-ho hurried to the designated room. Seeing that Jin Hee was fine, he felt strange. He asked Jin Hee why she was here. Jin Hee also had no idea about Ji-ho's arrival. Before the two of them could react, Ji-yeon rushed into the room like crazy. Seeing the two of them made her even more furious. She grabbed Jin Hee by the collar and angrily scolded her for being shameless to do such a thing. Jin Hee tried to explain but was slapped. She was furious at Ji-yeon for hitting someone without knowing the situation, but she considered that Ji-yeon was pregnant, so she suppressed her anger, didn't fight back and turned away. Ji-ho saw Jin Hee inexplicably slapped and felt guilty, wanted to chase after her and apologize. Ji-yeon, however, grabbed Ji-ho and wouldn't let him go. But Ji-ho didn't want to deal with this unreasonable woman at all, and ran out to chase after Jin Hee. Ji-yeon was sad, but she still followed him out. She begged Ji-ho not to go, but Ji-ho ignored her and insisted on chasing after Jin Hee. Ji-yeon tripped over herself in her panic and tumbled down the stairs. Ji-ho saw what happened and rushed her to the hospital. After an examination, the doctor told them that the baby had been aborted. On hearing the news, Ji-yeon was devastated. She found it hard to accept the truth for a while. She asked the doctor to re-examine her. The doctor said that she would never be able to get pregnant again. Ji-ho felt sad and blamed himself after hearing this. Although he didn't love Ji-yeon, he still looked forward to the arrival of this child. Ji-yeon blamed him and Jin Hee for the miscarriage. She said that they had killed their child. She told him to give the child back. These words were heard by her grandmother. Grandma also kept blaming Ji-ho and let loose a threat that she would never let him and Jin Hee go. Subsequently, Ji-yeon's grandmother came to Jin Hee's company to find her and grabbed Yeon's collar and started to abuse her. Facing her grandmother's unreasonable behavior, Jin Hee pushed her away and explained that she didn't go to the hotel to meet Ji-ho. When grandma saw that Jin Hee dared to contradict her, She instantly became furious and pushed Jin Hee to the ground directly. The fat girl quickly came over to help Jin Hee up, but grandma refused to give up. She pulled Jin Hee over and told Jin Hee to give her back the baby Ji-yeon was carrying. Jin Hee then learned about Ji-yeon's miscarriage. Facing grandma's accusations, Jin Hee tried to explain that she had gone to the hotel to meet Yuri, not Ji-ho, but Grandma Ji-yeon was still filled with hatred and angrily messed up Jin Hee's desk and finally dragged her out of the company with the help of the fat girl. After learning that Jin Hee was meeting with Yuri, Grandma Ji-yeon told Ji-ho about it, and Ji-ho instantly understood everything. It turned out that it was Yuri who was behind it all. The fat girl also told Ji-ho about what Jin Hee had encountered at the company, and Ji-ho instantly worried that it was his own mother who did it. Ji-ho found his stepmother and angrily rebuked her for her evil intentions, killing her father and now her child. But her stepmother doesn't think it's her fault. She thinks Ji-yeon fell down the stairs by accident. Ji-ho says she won't forgive her. Ji-ho is disappointed in her mother after hearing all this. How could she do such a thing? But her mother thinks she did it for his own good. Ji-yeon is immersed in grief after losing her child, holding a pillow and crying, imagining that the pillow is her child. Maybe this is her retribution. After being discharged from the hospital, Ji-yeon saw Jin Hee's son and remembered that Yenhua had killed his child and took it out on Jerry, angrily pushing Jerry to the ground. To get rid of her hatred, Ji-yeon decided to send Jerry abroad so that her sister would never see her son again like her. Jin Hee received a call from the community. The other party said that they had news of her son, but that in an hour her son would be flying to the UK. This was the last chance to find her son. Hearing the news, Jin Hee is anxious and hurriedly takes a taxi to the airport. But because of the distance, Jin Hee is worried that she won't be able to get to the airport in an hour. So she calls Fat Girl and asks her to find a way to stop her son from leaving the country. Fat Girl immediately sends a message asking Ji-ho to help Jin Hee. But at this time, Ji-ho is giving a speech at the shareholders meeting. This shareholders meeting will determine whether he can continue to hold the position of president. Ji-ho learns that Jin Hee is in trouble and wants to suppress his anxiety and finish this speech, but he couldn't let go of Jin Hee, so he apologized to the shareholders and left the meeting room. Yuri saw her son leave such an important meeting and was worried that the shareholders would immediately make Ji-ho the successor, so she tried to end the shareholders meeting on the grounds that Ji-ho had something urgent to do. But how could Grandma Ji-yeon agree to let Ji-ho go up and speak right away? She said that a conclusion must be reached today. On the other side, under Ji-yeon's manipulation, Jerry and his foster parents were preparing to board the plane. Before leaving, Jerry even drew a picture and gave it to Ji-yeon. It said, "The person I like the most in the world is you, Auntie." Finally, reluctantly, she got on the plane with her foster parents. Ji-ho arrived at the airport just in time to see Ji-yeon preparing to leave. But now, finding Jerry was more important. He didn't think about it much either. Jin Hee also rushed to the airport as quickly as she could. From the staff, she learned that the flight to the UK did not have Jerry on it. Jin Hee instantly went dumb. It turned out that Ji-yeon had deliberately booked 2 tickets to prevent any accidents. One was a direct flight while the other was a connecting flight from Hong Kong. After learning that her son had already boarded the plane, Jin Hee tried to buy a ticket to board the plane to find her son, but was told that she was on parole and could not apply for a visa. Jin Hee was so anxious that she asked the staff to help her, but the other party was also powerless. The heartbroken Jin Hee lost her voice and burst into tears at the airport. Ji-ho realized at that moment that Jin Hee had a son. He couldn't believe it and felt so sad that he couldn't breathe. Ji-ho went straight to the fat woman and asked about Jin Hee's son. Seeing that the truth had been revealed, the fat woman no longer hid it. She told Ji-ho that son was Jin Hee and Ji-ho's child. Ji-ho felt even more pain after learning this. He thought that he shouldn't get any closer to Jin Hee. He wished so much that he hadn't gone to the airport that day. Jin Hee returned home in a low mood and took out the sweater she knitted for Taeyang herself. From the drawer, there was also a photo of Taeyang as a child with her, which she held tightly in her arms and burst into tears again. After her emotions had calmed down, Jin Hee asked the person who had been helping her find her son to come to her. She begged him to go abroad for her. However, a large amount of money was needed in order to find her son. Jin Hee began to raise money from everywhere. Since she was still on bail, no bank was willing to lend her money. Jin Hee, who was at her wit's end, had no choice but to go to Ji-ho for help. Ji-ho, who didn't know about the child, told her to get out of there quickly. Just as Jin Hee was about to tell her about the son, unexpectedly, Ji-yeon came in. She hurriedly stepped forward to stop her. Ji-yeon guessed that Jin Hee had come for money. She immediately took out a stack of cash from her wallet and scattered it on the floor. She told her to take the money and go. Don't ever come to bother her husband again. Although Jin Hee felt extremely humiliated, but she really needed the money for her son, so she had to swallow her pride and pick up all the money on the floor and tell Ji-yeon that she would pay her back later. Ji-ho, who had come to see Ji-yeon, accidentally saw this scene and immediately called the fat girl from his office to ask if Jin-hee really needed the money. The fat girl told him the whole story, and Ji-ho said he was willing to help but couldn't say that he did it. The fat girl immediately told Jin-hee not to worry, that she had already borrowed the money. Jin-hee, who saw hope, was overjoyed and was also very grateful to the fat girl for helping her so much. Ji-yeon sending her child abroad was discovered by Officer Park. With such a big bargaining chip in his hands, of course he couldn't let it go. In the blink of an eye, he found Ji-yeon and condemned her, while threatening Ji-yeon to pay a hush money, or he would tell her husband about it. Ji-yeon had no choice but to beg Officer Park to help her hide it again. But before giving the money, there was one more condition, was that no matter what, Jin-hee must not find the child. Officer Park said that as long as he was alive, they would be able to meet. Now that the internet is so advanced, finding someone is no problem. Ji-yeon once again emphasized that no matter what, they must not let them meet. Officer Park was asking about Jerry's news when he learned that there was a boy in a similar situation to Jerry that day, who unfortunately had a fire with his family after arriving in the UK. Officer Park felt that this was an opportunity and immediately forged a death confirmation that Jerry had died in a fire in the UK. Ji-yeon was very surprised when she saw it. Officer Park felt that this was the best way to prevent them from meeting. Soon, Jin-hee received a call from the Child Loss Center. The caller claimed to have received news of Jerry's death. Jin-hee couldn't believe this fact. Hurry to the child center. This scene was also just seen by Ji-ho, so he followed. When Jin-hee arrived at the Child Loss Center and saw her son's death report, she broke down. She didn't want to believe that her son had just left this world. Jin-hee couldn't withstand the blow for a while and fainted directly. Ji-ho arrived just in time and took her to the hospital for treatment. Ji-ho saw the death certificate of son and felt extremely painful for what happened to Jin-hee. On the other side, Ji-yeon was burning the card that Son gave her, but was startled by Suya, who suddenly barged in. In her panic, she threw the painting into the trash can. After Ji-yeon left, Suya saw the painting from the trash can that hadn't burned completely. She felt a strong affinity for it and kept it. Jin-hee woke up but still refused to accept the harsh reality. She even doubted if she had dreamed it. It wasn't until she saw the death confirmation letter next to her that she was pulled back to reality. Jin-hee immediately tore up the death certificate. The fat girl immediately hugged her to comfort her. Watching Jin-hee, who was crying her heart out, Ji-ho also shed tears of sadness. Just as Jin-hee went to the riverside for a walk, she suddenly received a call from her younger sister. Suya happily told Jin-hee that her mother's body had responded and would recover soon. Jin-hee went to her mother's side and told her the news of Son's death. She blamed herself for all of this. After calming down, Jin-hee discovered the painting placed on the bedside table. She asked Suya what it was. Suya told her sister that she had found it in Ji-yeon's room and suspected that Ji-yeon had taken Son. Jin-hee asked Suya why she thought so. Suya told her sister about the time she saw Ji-yeon at the orphanage 6 years ago. Jin-hee looked at the painting in her hands and guessed that Ji-yeon must have done it, so she called the prison to confirm whether Ji-yeon had been in or out after she gave birth to her child. After getting a definite answer, Jin-hee immediately went to Ji-ho's house and sent a text message to invite Ji-yeon out. The pain of losing her son made Jin-hee lose her mind instantly and pressed Ji-yeon against the wall to question her about why she was so malicious to her child. Just as Ji-yeon was about to die, the police forcibly pulled the furious Jin-hee away, and soon the two were taken to the police station together, as Jin-hee was on parole. If they could not reconcile this time, she would be sent to prison again. The guilty Ji-yeon, however, wanted to settle the matter quietly and found an excuse to get rid of the police officers. As long as Jin-hee doesn't tell Ji-ho about this, she will let it go. Although Jin-hee was extremely angry, this was not the time to act on impulse. She had no choice but to reach a settlement with Ji-yeon. The fat girl told Ji-ho about Jin-hee's suspicion of Ji-yeon. Ji-ho questioned Ji-yeon about the son for Jin-hee's sake, but Ji-yeon still denied it. Ji-ho couldn't stand it anymore and declares that he will no longer treat him as a family member. Ji-yeon sees that Ji-ho knows everything and is worried that he will tell Ji-ho everything. Ji-yeon immediately goes to Jin-hee to argue. Jin-hee then learns about Ji-ho's relationship with Ji-ho. She immediately made an appointment to meet Ji-ho. Ji-ho sees that Jin-hee already knows his identity and no longer hides it, and apologizes to her for what his mother did, and confessed that he really liked Jin-hee and was willing to do anything for her. Jin-hee didn't want to know why he liked her. She just wanted to know if Ji-ho was really willing to do anything for her, even if it would endanger his family one day. Ji-ho immediately replied that he could do anything for her. The next morning Jin-hee handed in her resignation to Yoo-jun. Originally she just wanted to clear her name and uncover the truth, but now her goal was also to bring Ji-yeon down. That day, Jin-hee participated in the marketing recruitment held by Ji-ho's company under a pseudonym. She won first place and successfully won the championship. When she arrived at the company's award ceremony, Jin-hee's appearance took everyone by surprise. Ji-yeon was the first to jump out an object. She tried to prevent Jin-hee from entering the company on the grounds that she used a pseudonym. However, Jin-hee said that the company did not stipulate that participants could not use pseudonyms. Ji-yeon said that there was evidence to prove that Jin-hee did not make the plan. Jin-hee said that she just gave a presentation without reading the content. This remark made everyone in the audience praise her. Ji-yeon also shut up completely. Eventually, with Ji-ho's help, Jin-hee not only won the 30 million prize, but also joined the company and became Ji-yeon's subordinate. Jin-hee found Ji-ho and declared war on him, saying bluntly that he would make him pay for trampling on her. Just then, Ji-yeon came in. Jin-hee immediately changed her expression upon seeing this. In front of Ji-yeon, deliberately asked Ji-ho why he cared so much about her, and then thoughtfully fixed Ji-ho's tie, which made Ji-yeon so angry that she went up to Ji-ho and asked what they had just been doing. Ji-ho didn't pay any attention to Ji-yeon, and this was just the first step in Jin-hee's revenge. Then the fat girl found out the time and place where Officer Park was going to take bribes. After learning this news, Jin-hee immediately disguised herself and appeared at the scene where Officer Park was going to accept bribes. She saw the boss push a red box in front of Officer Park. Officer Park opened the box, checked that it was correct, and happily accepted the bribe money. This scene was captured clearly by Jin-hee's camera. With this video, Officer Park would be caught red-handed this time, but Jin-hee did not hand over this evidence to the police. Instead, she concocted a plot of separation in her heart. The next day at noon, Ji-yeon proposed to treat her colleagues to hot pot, and pretended to invite Jin-hee to go with her. But Jin-hee declined the invitation on the pretext of work. After Ji-yeon left the office with her colleagues, Jin-hee took out the evidence of Officer Park's guilt, and quickly opened Ji-yeon's computer. But Ji-yeon's computer was set with a password. Jin-hee tried several times but failed, and Ji-yeon, who had just gone downstairs, suddenly realized that something was wrong and was about to turn back. At this time, Jin-hee successfully opened the computer using their wedding date, and uploaded the evidence of Officer Park's bribery to the police website. An important step was to report it in Ji-yeon's name. When Ji-yeon returned to the office, Jin-hee had already completed all the operations, and was calmly doing his own things. Ji-yeon quickly opened the computer to check but did not find anything unusual. After scolding Jin-hee, he left the office. Soon, colleagues from the police station gathered together, and discussed Officer Park's case. Officer Park even looked like he was joining in the fun, asking his colleagues what was so interesting. When he turned on his computer and saw the video of him taking bribes, he was instantly shocked. He immediately asked who did it. He also said that he was being framed. Before long, the Anti-Corruption Bureau found him, and they forcibly took him to the bureau for investigation on charges of bribery. When he learned that Ji-yeon had reported him, Officer Park was very angry. He felt that Ji-yeon was crossing the river to destroy the bridge. He immediately asked someone to call Ji-yeon's father for him. He demanded that he bail him out, or he would reveal the whole truth to the public. Not only that, Officer Park also revealed that Ji-yeon had faked Jin-hee's son's death. Learning that his daughter had committed another crime, Ji-yeon's father was both terrified and helpless. He had no choice but to once again go against his principles and agree to Officer Park's demands. After returning home, her father questioned Ji-yeon whether she had reported Officer Park. Ji-yeon said she had no idea, but by tracing the uploaded IP address, it was confirmed that it was sent from her computer. Ji-yeon then realized that it was Jin-hee who had done it. Her father then told her what she had done to Jin-hee's child, and accused her of how she could have done such a horrible thing. He questioned Ji-yeon what kind of heavenly punishment she wanted to receive. Her father regretted that he should not have helped her from the beginning. After ending the conversation with her father, Ji-yeon went to her stepmother's room. She found her stepmother, who was paralyzed in bed, miraculously speaking. She also sat up and hugged Jin-hee and the others. When her stepmother saw Ji-yeon's face full of anger, Ji-yeon was so scared that she turned around and tried to escape from here, but was pulled back by her stepmother, and then Ji-yeon was killed. Ji-won confessed to Jin-hee's crime, and the fact that she pushed her off the cliff, and said that she was going to take her to the police station to surrender. Ji-yeon was instantly terrified, but who knew Ji-ho would suddenly come, and father and grandmother also heard their conversation, and learned that their granddaughter had committed so many crimes. Her grandmother couldn't take the blow and fainted on the spot. Ji-yeon was still defending herself, and shouted that she didn't do it. Under everyone's condemnation, Ji-yeon completely broke down. However, all of this was just a scene imagined in her mind. After she came to her senses, Ji-yeon was so scared that she immediately ran home and hid under the covers, trembling with fear. She was worried that her stepmother would really wake up. She immediately contacted a nursing home and tried to send her stepmother to a remote place. Then she called her father to discuss the matter, but it happened to be heard by Jin-hee outside the door. Jin-hee decided to move her mother before Ji-yeon's action. She tried to contact a suitable nursing home, but asked many homes and there were no hospital rooms. Unfortunately, Jin-hee had to ask Ji-ho for help. Ji-ho learned that Jin-hee's mother would be in danger and immediately called Yoo-jun. Learning that it was to help Jin-hee's mother, Yoo-jun immediately agreed. After spending time together, he believes that Jin-hee is innocent. With Yoo-jun's help, Jin Hee quickly receives news that there is a hospital bed available. She immediately calls Suya to confirm that no one is at home and asks her to pack her mother's luggage. Jin Hee returns and sees that Yoo-jun has even prepared her car. She immediately goes back to pick up her mother. After successfully putting her mother in the car, Jin Hee finally lets her guard down. She also expresses her gratitude to Yoo-jun for helping her. When Ji-yeon hurriedly returned to pick up her stepdaughter to take her to the sanatorium, she found the room empty. She immediately guessed that Jin Hee had picked someone up. This made her panic and she didn't know what to do. After taking care of her mother's affairs, Ji-ho told Jin Hee some news. The woman at the top is Woolwa, a world-renowned top investor. Jin Hee was told to find a way to win her over. Gaining the other person's heart and trust would be very helpful for her revenge. Meanwhile, Ji-yeon also told Ji-ho about Woolwa's return to Korea to invest, and also had her eye on Woolwa. So she found out about her preferences and sent her a designer bag. Woolwa had her assistant return the bag directly. Jin Hee, on the other hand, did things differently. She knew that Woolwa definitely didn't lack for anything, so she personally made a batch of rice cakes and gave them to her. Woolwa, who had always lived abroad, just one bite brought back unforgettable memories for her. Because of this, Julia agreed to Jin Hee's invitation and would attend their company's makeup launch event. While Jin Hee was happy, Ji-ho told her that Ji-yeon had submitted her proposal to him in his name. Jin Hee was not surprised. She had long suspected that Ji-yeon would do this. That day, Ji-ho came to the restaurant for dinner and happened to see Jin Hee eating with Ji-ho and couldn't help but think of the time he and Jin Hee had sat in this very seat. He felt a pang of bitterness in his heart. On the day of the presentation, Jin Hee suddenly received a phone call from the nursing home. The person on the other end said that her mother could speak now. Then she wrote down the address of the nursing home and said she would be there in a while. Ji-yeon, who was standing nearby, panicked when she heard this. Jin Hee told Ji-yeon that she had to go out for a while. Ji-yeon, worried that her stepmother would reveal her crimes, immediately ran to check the address Jin Hee had just written down, and hurriedly followed her. Little did she know that this was just a trap set by Jin Hee to make her miss the presentation. Ji-yeon was not there, so naturally Jin Hee came in her place to help with the makeup. Without Ji-yeon's interruptions, Jin Hee successfully unleashed her talent on stage. This also made Woolwa's favorable impression of Jin Hee increase a lot. On the other side, Ji-yeon, who had the fake address, came out of the nursing home feeling lost. At this time, she realized that she had been played by Jin Hee. Ji-yeon was so angry that she wanted to die. Back at the company, she wanted to confront Jin Hee, but that would reveal her own wrongdoing. Just then, Woolwa took the initiative to invite Jin Hee to her home as a guest. Ji-yeon, who was on the side, also ran over after learning about it. While the two were chatting excitedly, Ji-yeon rushed in and told Jin Hee all her dirty deeds. Woolwa, after hearing this, completely disowned Jin Hee and even told her assistant to throw her out. Ji-yeon, having achieved her goal, was also given the opportunity to join Julia's next dinner party. Ji-ho, after learning that Jin Hee had been rejected by Woolwa, gave her some more information and said that Woolwa valued competence and encouraged Jin Hee not to give up easily. Jin Hee's hope was rekindled and found the courage to approach Woolwa again, but was still rejected. Ji-ho had to step in personally. It turned out that Ji-ho and Woolwa had already met while abroad. The two had a good relationship. As long as he said the word, Woolwa would help him with all his strength. But Ji-ho didn't take this shortcut. Instead, he assured Woolwa that Jin Hee was definitely being wronged, and that the person who framed her also made her lose her child, and told Woolwa all of Jin Hee's tragic experiences. Woolwa began to sympathize with Jin Hee when she heard it. Jin Hee is now working hard to uncover the truth. Julia has been undergoing hypnotherapy due to her memory loss. One day, she finally recovered some of her terrible memories during hypnosis. She saw a woman with two children looking at flowers. I don't know what they were talking about. Then the scene changed. A woman was locked in a car and someone was trying to kill her. Finally, she learned that her real name was Hyri. Then she asked her assistant to show her the flower chart. She found the flower in her memory and it was called Adonis. Jin Hee came to see her again. She saw Woolwa studying the yellow Adonis, so she took the initiative to tell her the meaning of this flower. It can overcome the cold and overcome the world. Because it can overcome the world, it is also called the lucky flower. Jin Hee's words made Julia recall that scene and feel as if she had said the same thing. Julia asked her where she had heard those words. Jin Hee said that a person she had loved had told her. Hearing this, Julia was a little moved, and also remembered what Ji-ho had said. She decided to listen to Jin Hee's explanation. Jin Hee told the whole story of how she had been framed. She, Julia, promised that she would be punished if she lied. When Jin Hee was about to leave, Julia asked her to take responsibility for applying her own makeup. This made Jin Hee feel extremely surprised. After Ji-ho and Ji-yeon arrived, Woolwa directly asked Ji-ho if Jin Hee was really a commercial spy. Ji-ho is not a person who can tell lies. He explained that Yeonhwa was framed. Ji-yeon, however, kept arguing that Jin Hee was the murderer. Ji-ho was very angry after hearing this, and said goodbye to Julia and left directly. Back home, he felt unable to agree with what Ji-yeon had done. In order to get what he wanted, he resorted to slandering others without any scruples. Ji-ho was increasingly disappointed with Ji-yeon. On the other hand, Ji-yeon's father used his position to release Officer Park. Jin-hee learned of this and submitted a report to various authorities, complaining that Ji-yeon's father was protecting Officer Park. She wanted to bring her stepfather's reputation down and have him step down from his position as a judge. With Jin-hee's continuous reporting, the matter quickly reached the top. The top immediately sent someone to search Ji-yeon's father's office. After inquiring, he learned that the person who reported him was his adopted daughter Jin-hee. However, he discovered that the person who reported him was his adopted daughter Jin-hee. Soon, his stepfather approached Jin-hee and asked her to stop reporting against him, saying that she was maliciously slandering him. But Jin-hee had no intention of communicating with him, so she deliberately poured water on her clothes and made an excuse to leave the tea room, and then tricked her stepfather's car keys from the doorman and hurriedly copied all the keys. After returning, Jin-hee lied that she had met someone she knew, so she was delayed for a while. Her stepfather became a little impatient and threatened Jin-hee to stop reporting immediately, or else she would not sit still. Jin-hee was not at all afraid and told her stepfather that she would make him lose everything. After saying that, she left with confidence. However, her stepfather was plunged into anxiety. When Ji-yeon returned home, she saw her father looking sad. She immediately encouraged her father to sue Jin-hee for defamation of character. Soon, Jin-hee received a call from the police station. Her stepfather had sued her for defamation of character. He demanded that Jin-hee come to the police station for questioning. Ji-yeon heard this and mocked Jin-hee for daring to move against her father without evidence. Jin-hee, however, said that she was going to the police station right now to turn in the evidence. Ji-yeon was dumbfounded. Could it be that she really had evidence? The police officer said that Ji-yeon's father said that he didn't even know Officer Park. Facing the police officer's questioning, Jin-hee directly produced the evidence. Seeing the photo of the two of them meeting, the police officer instantly didn't dare say a word. The police chief, under pressure from public opinion, regretfully told Ji-yeon's father that now that there was both a letter of complaint and evidence, he had no choice but to submit to a police investigation. After hearing the director's words, Ji-yeon's father was full of worry and begged the director to think of a way to help him resolve the matter. The director, fearing that he would be implicated, politely refused him and advised Ji-yeon's father to resign voluntarily. This was the best way to do it. But Ji-yeon's father was unwilling to resign like this, so he told Ji-yeon's grandmother about it. After learning about it, grandmother prepared a valuable painting and gave it to the director in an attempt to help her son get through the difficult time. As expected, after receiving the famous painting, the director was full of praise and stated in person that he would help resolve the matter. At that moment, Jin-hee called to confirm that no one was at her stepfather's house and secretly opened the door with the copied key. She tiptoed into the study and searched everywhere for the suicide note left by her mother and quickly found it in a box. Looking at her mother's words of no hope for life, Jin-hee almost collapsed. But just then, Grandma Ji-yeon suddenly returned. Jin-hee hurriedly tidied up the desk and hid in a corner, preparing to sneak out of the room. Unexpectedly, she heard her grandmother talking to her stepfather on the phone and learned that they had used bribery to keep their positions as judges. Jin-hee took advantage of the fact that Grandma Ji-yeon had gone back to her room and quietly slipped out. She took the suicide note and the letter written by her mother to be authenticated to see if it was written by the same person. However, the results would not be available for a few days. Jin-hee had to leave her contact information and wait for the results. While waiting for the results, Jin-hee did not idle. She found the reporter who had written about her case 6 years ago and hoped to get the other person's help. This reporter had actually been paying attention to Jin-hee's case. At that time, everything he published was suppressed. Jin-hee asked the reporter to help her expose the truth again. The reporter knew that she was innocent, so he was happy to help her and asked Jin-hee to collect useful evidence. He would then report on the story step by step. Jin-hee thanked the reporter for his help. Then Jin-hee found Ji-ho and told her about her stepfather bribing her boss with the painting. This caused her to worry that the evidence she provided would not allow her stepfather to be punished as he deserved. She told Ji-ho about her worries. If she knew where Ji-yeon's grandmother had bought the painting, then she could find evidence that she had given the painting to the director. In this way, they would have no way to argue. Ji-ho took on the task after hearing this and decided to help Jin-hee investigate the painting. Ji-yeon learned that Jin-hee was going to help Julia apply makeup, so she came again to slander Jin-hee and tried to gain Julia's trust so that she could help her apply makeup. Unexpectedly, Julia rebuked her on the spot, claiming that she would not let a malicious person do her makeup. Ji-yeon was furious after being rejected. When she left, she thought about what Julia had just said about being allergic to honey, and a bad idea came to her. Ji-yeon immediately called Officer Park and asked him to prepare a bottle of bee venom for her. Ji-yeon injected the bee venom she got into the foundation Jin-hee made herself, and just as she was about to close the lid, she suddenly heard footsteps outside, and in her panic, she accidentally stuck the needle in her arm. However, Ji-yeon didn't care, but hurriedly packed everything up and put it in her bag, and waited for Jin-hee to come in. She put on a fake calm face and acted like her superior, and told her to work hard and not to disgrace the company, and then smugly left the room. Jin-hee didn't notice anything, and confidently walked towards the cosmetics she had carefully prepared. To make sure there were no problems, Jin-hee deliberately tested it on her hand, but the injected bee venom would not act so quickly, and Jin-hee therefore had no misgivings. Woolwa soon arrived at the press conference. Jin-hee quickly applied a delicate makeup look to Julia with her skilled makeup skills. Julia looked at her face in the mirror, satisfied with her noble and elegant appearance. However, as soon as she walked into the venue, Ji-yeon's hand suddenly reacted. In order to prevent the matter from being exposed, she quickly ran out of the venue and rushed to the hospital in time. Meanwhile, Julia was preparing to answer questions during an interview, but felt a tightness in her chest and was unable to speak. Jin-hee looks at her hands, which have suddenly gone numb after trying on the makeup. Julia is rushed to the hospital due to a bee sting. Ji-yeon arrives at the hospital first, and anxiously begs the doctor to help her. Coincidentally, Julia and Jin-hee also arrive at the same hospital, and are in the same consultation room. The doctor examines Julia and says that she has an allergic reaction to bee venom, and that an antidote will alleviate the symptoms. Ji-yeon hid behind the curtain, scared and unable to make a sound. Julia's assistant immediately questioned Jin-hee about whether she had added bee venom to her cosmetics. Jin-hee said that she had personally tested the cosmetics and that they were fine. Just then, Ji-ho arrived. She was the first to discover that Jin-hee's hands were also very serious. She told her to go for treatment as soon as possible. However, Jin-hee insisted on staying here to accompany Julia. At this time, a young nurse suddenly came in. She wanted to transfer Julia to a VIP room. Ji-ho asked the nurse to also take a look at Jin-hee's hand. The nurse was surprised to see that Jin-hee had the same symptoms. She said, "Why are there so many patients allergic to bee venom today?" Jin-hee subconsciously turned her head and accidentally discovered Ji-yeon's shoes. She instantly understood that this was another trick by Ji-yeon, so she went over and pulled back the curtain. Ji-yeon was so scared that she didn't know what to do. The assistant quickly went over and checked Ji-yeon's hand and asked her why she had been stung by a bee. Ji-yeon lied and said that it was because she had used Jin-hee's foundation. Jin-hee immediately slapped her. Julia also couldn't hold back and slapped her. She scolded Ji-yeon for her really bad character. Ji-yeon really threw a stone at her own feet this time. Jin-hee also gained Julia's trust because of Ji-yeon's frame-up. Julia was puzzled and asked Jin-hee why Ji-yeon was making things difficult for her. So Jin-hee told her everything without holding back. After hearing what Jin-hee had been through, Julia was furious. She never imagined there could be such a vicious woman. She had made someone's life so miserable. Looking at Jin-hee, who looked so aggrieved, Woolwa took her in her arms, comforting her like a mother, and promising her that she would definitely help Jin-hee make those people pay. Ji-ho, on the other hand, found Ji-yeon and accused her of how she could have done such a thing, and told her to apologize to Julia herself. Unexpectedly, Ji-yeon still argued, and asked Ji-ho if she had any evidence to prove that she did it. After that, Ji-yeon angrily left. When she returned to the office, she shamelessly told Jin-hee to apologize to her. Why should she slap her? Jin-hee said she deserved to be slapped for doing something wrong. After returning home, Ji-yeon described the bee sting incident as a conspiracy by Ji-ho and Jin-hee to frame her. Ji-ho, who didn't know the truth of the matter, believed it. Ji-yeon took advantage of the situation and threw herself into Ji-ho's arms. She pitifully sought Ji-ho's comfort. The stepfather also discovered that Jin-hee's mother's suicide note was missing. He guessed that things were not as simple as they seemed, so he found Ji-yeon and questioned her about whether she had pushed Jin-hee's mother off the cliff. Ji-yeon still refused to admit it. It wasn't until she heard from her father that the suicide note was missing that she panicked. She confessed part of the truth to her father, but she didn't say that she was the one who pushed Jin-hee's mother off the cliff. Ji-yeon once again begged her father to help her. She said that she must prevent the fake suicide note from being examined. Otherwise, she would bear criminal responsibility. Her father was also annoyed that she had not yet solved the problem and now this had come up again. That day, Jin-hee brought a fake painting of the same style to the director's house. She lied and said that the painting she had given last time was a fake. The staff accidentally sent the wrong one. Although the lady felt very angry, she did not suspect anything. She turned around and went back to her room to get the real painting. Unexpectedly, all of this was captured on Jin-hee's camera. Jin-hee's tactic of passing off a fake Israel not only obtained evidence of her stepfather's bribery, but also a valuable pair of famous paintings. However, she did not keep the paintings for herself, but sent them to the court together with the video, as evidence to report her stepfather, and wrote a disciplinary letter to the court supervision team to prevent mutual affairs from happening again. Jin-hee handed over the recorded video to the reporter, and intended to force the director to refrain from helping through public opinion pressure. As expected, the director was very angry about the painting exchange incident, and called Ji-yeon's father to question him. He asked if Ji-yeon's father was playing a joke on him, and told him to take the fake painting back immediately. Ji-yeon's father was puzzled. He immediately called his mother to verify the situation. His mother said that she would never exchange paintings, and asked her son to find out what was going on. Before Ji-yeon's father could find out what was going on, he received a report from his secretary. His disciplinary application had been sent to the Ministry of Justice. Ji-yeon's father hurriedly went to see the director of the department and asked him to help him prepare a defense. The director of the department, in order to protect himself, decided to convene a disciplinary committee against Ji-yeon's father. Ji-yeon's grandmother learned that the famous painting she bought had turned out to be a fake and cried with her head in her hands. The next day, Ji-yeon's father was interrogated. Although during the investigation and questioning, he vehemently denied having any illegal dealings with Officer Park. The bribery was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. To avoid causing a more negative impact on the court, and under pressure, Ji-yeon's father had to resign from his position as a judge. It can be said that he is completely finished. Ji-yeon's grandmother almost died of anger when she saw the image of her son stepping down on TV. As the saying goes, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. This is entirely Ji-yeon's father's own fault. Ji-yeon felt very guilty when she saw her father become like this because of her. Ji-ho, in order to get Julia's investment, publicly solicited new product planning cases. Not only can he get a bonus, but also the opportunity to become a company model. Ji-yeon was furious when she saw this, and felt that her position as a model was threatened. So she went to Ji-ho to vent her anger. Ji-ho told her that this was Ji-ho's idea. Ji-yeon had no choice but to go back and desperately think of ideas to hold onto her position. But she really couldn't think of a new product. But she was worried that Jin-hee would take her position as a model. After learning that Jin-hee had already completed the plan and placed the proposal information in the company drawer, she then started to think of evil schemes again, and wanted to take Jin-hee's proposal for herself. She started copying it when no one was around, and she also thought about making Jin-hee look like a fool in public tomorrow. The next day, the press conference gathered the company's top executives. Julia, as an investor, became the only judge at this meeting. When Julia asked who would present first, Ji-yeon pretended to be generous and let Jin-hee present first. Jin-hee also didn't hold back with her and went directly to the podium. While Jin-hee was speaking on the stage with relish, Ji-yeon suddenly jumped out and accused Jin-hee of plagiarizing her idea. But she didn't realize that it was all Jin-hee's plan. Ji-yeon copied the one he deliberately put in the drawer, and deliberately wrote a few words wrong. This is the correct one after I corrected it myself. On the spot she exposed Ji-yeon's lie. When Julia asked Ji-yeon how this plan was conceived, Ji-yeon stammered for a long time, and made up a lie at random. Jin-hee didn't want to miss this opportunity, and revealed the fact that Ji-yeon had stolen other products' proposals 5 years ago. At that time, it was because of Jin-hee's proposal that Ji-ho was able to get through the company's crisis. The evidence was all in front of Ji-yeon, but he still refused to admit it. Julia couldn't bear to watch anymore. How could a superior take credit for a subordinate's proposal? This is basically criminal behavior. Ji-ho, who discovered the truth, was furious. He demanded that Ji-yeon apologize to Julia. Unexpectedly, when the two arrived at Julia's office, they saw Jin-hee and Ji-ho. Ji-yeon saw that the two could not let go of their pride here, and directly stated that the proposal today was her idea. She felt that she was being wronged. After saying that, she just left. Ji-ho really had no words for Ji-yeon, and chased after her to ask what she was doing. Did she forget that she came here to apologize? Ji-yeon said that she couldn't do it. Since it was already like this, she would be the bad guy. Reluctantly, Ji-ho had to go back and apologize to Julia on Ji-yeon's behalf. Woolwa said that the person they really needed to apologize to was Jin-hee, not her, because Jin-hee's outstanding proposal not only won the prize money, but also became the model for their company. And Ji-yeon's persona has completely collapsed, and became the butt of jokes. Soon after, Jin-hee received a call from the handwriting analysis department. The other party said that the analysis results were in. Jin-hee hurried to the analysis department and learned that the suicide note and the letters were not written by the same person. The suicide note was written with the left hand. After hearing this, Jin-hee became suspicious of Ji-yeon. When she left the analysis center, Officer Park, who had followed her, appeared in the doorway. He was still upset about Jin-hee reporting him last time, so he would not let Jin-hee off lightly. Officer Park, as a police officer, found the person in charge of the identification center, and asked him to report Jin-hee's identification results to him first. Just as Jin-hee was worrying about how to get Ji-yeon's left-handed notes, she suddenly remembered that Ji-yeon's right hand had just been infected with bee venom, so she must have used her left hand to write when she went to the hospital. Sure enough, at the hospital, Jin-hee easily obtained the information Ji-yeon had filled in with her left hand. She immediately contacted the people at the identification center, and faxed Ji-yeon's left-handed handwriting over to them for immediate identification. Meanwhile, Officer Park also received the news, and immediately contacted Ji-yeon to tell her about Jin-hee's transmission of the handwriting, and asked if she had ever written with her left hand. Ji-yeon affirmed that she had never written with her left hand, but then thought about it, and realized that she had filled out an information form with her left hand at the hospital the last time. Ji-yeon instantly panicked. Officer Park, as a police officer, asked for Jinhee's identification results, but was told by the technician that the results were not yet available. Officer Park asked them to let him know as soon as the results were available. Then Yoo-jun suddenly appeared and said that even the police did not have the right to know other people's privacy, and successfully stopped Officer Park's intentions. Ji-yeon, in desperation, went to her father for advice, but her father was in doubt. He had clearly locked the suicide note in the cabinet, and Jinhee could not have possibly gotten it. Just as the two were in doubt, her father suddenly remembered that he had seen Jinhee at the hotel. At that time, he had handed over the key to someone while waiting for a guest to park, and Jinhee had left in the middle. Ji-yeon guessed that Jinhee must have copied her father's key and used it to enter the house and rummage through the drawers. In this way, Jinhee's fingerprints must have been left on the drawers. Thinking of this, Ji-yeon once again had a wicked idea. She told her father to take this opportunity to send Jinhee to jail. Ji-yeon then called the police and claimed that someone had stolen things from her house. The next day, when she went to work, she copied her father's key and secretly put it in Jinhee's bag. That afternoon, the police came to the house to collect fingerprints. When the police officer asked if they had lost anything, her father lied and said that he had lost a large amount of gold and silver jewelry. Just as Jinhee was filming an image promotional video for the company, she suddenly received a call from the appraisal agency and was told that the appraisal results were in. The handwriting on the suicide note was the same as the writing on Ji-yeon's left hand. In other words, it was Ji-yeon who caused her mother to become like this. Just as Jinhee was thinking about how to punish Ji-yeon, the police came to the door and took Yeon-hwa to the police station on suspicion of theft. The police asked her where she had hidden the stolen gold. Jinhee said she had never taken it. Jinhee looked puzzled when she saw the evidence the police produced. However, at this moment, Ji-yeon suddenly appeared at the police station and accused Jinhee of theft in person. Faced with Ji-yeon's aggressiveness, Jinhee then raised the issue of the suicide note. Ji-yeon instantly became panicked. She was afraid that Jinhee would expose her crime, so she asked the police to let her and Jinhee talk alone. Ji-yeon offered to reconcile, but only if Jinhee promised not to pursue the suicide note. Jinhee did not agree to Ji-yeon's request. Ji-yeon told her to think carefully before making a decision. Unexpectedly, Jinhee recorded the entire conversation between the two. Ji-ho also rushed to the police station after learning the news, to persuade Jinhee to reconcile with Ji-yeon and go outside first before making any further plans. But Jinhee doesn't want to trade the suffering her mother has endured, and doesn't want to give up this opportunity to punish Ji-yeon. Just as Ji-ho doesn't know how to persuade Jinhee, he suddenly receives a call from Yoo-jun, who tells him to tell Jinhee to hurry to the hospital. Jinhee's mother has woken up and wants to talk to Jinhee. Upon hearing this, Jinhee is shocked, just as Ji-yeon is anxious because Jinhee has not made a decision on reconciliation. Jinhee calls and says she is willing to reconcile with her. After the two of them leave the police station, Ji-yeon warns Jinhee that if she reneges on the deal and continues to pursue the suicide note, she will be sent to prison immediately. Just as Ji-yeon is about to leave, Ji-ho immediately comes to pick up Jinhee and rushes to the hospital. Ji-yeon suddenly senses something is wrong and sneaks up behind them. Jinhee is overjoyed to see her mother come to and rushes into her arms, crying with joy. After that, her mother tells her everything she knows. Ji-yeon is the real murderer of Ji-won, and that Ji-yeon pushed her off the cliff to steal the disc. Hearing this, Jinhee can't hold back her anger. Her mother keeps apologizing to her. If she hadn't married Ji-yeon's father, her daughter would not have been framed. But Jinhee did not blame her mother for her choice at the time. In her heart, she was already satisfied as long as her mother could wake up. Her mother said that from now on she would uncover the truth. She asked Jinhee to take her to find her stepfather. The two's conversation was heard clearly by Ji-yeon outside the door. Learning that her crimes were about to be uncovered, Ji-yeon was anxious and at a loss. No matter what, she had to find a way to stop it. If it was uncovered, she would be finished. When her mother learned that Ji-yeon had even married Ji-ho, she couldn't believe it. Ji-yeon killed her sister, but she still managed to marry Ji-ho with a clear conscience. She couldn't wait any longer. She wanted to immediately expose Ji-yeon's crime. Jinhee told her mother to calm down. They didn't have any conclusive evidence yet. Even if they went, no one would believe what they said. Ji-yeon saw Jinhee and Ji-ho leaving the nursing home, immediately called the nursing home. At this time, a caregiver came over and told Jinhee's mother that her daughter asked her to go to the front door. Jinhee's mother mistakenly thought it was Jinhee and went to the front door, but before she could react, Ji-yeon suddenly came out and grabbed her. Without saying a word, she began to desperately push Jinhee's mother into the car. Jinhee's mother, whose body had just recovered, was no match for Ji-yeon and was finally forced into the car. Jinhee's mother was worried that Ji-yeon would do something to her again, so she frantically obstructed Ji-yeon, who was driving. Ji-yeon had no choice but to stop. Jinhee's mother took this opportunity to escape from the car, limping as she desperately fled. Ji-yeon saw this and hurriedly ran off the car to give chase to her stepmother. Soon, her stepmother was forced to a cliff. Ji-yeon saw that her stepmother had no way to escape and closed in on her stepmother step by step. The stepmother, with no way out, did not beg Ji-yeon for mercy, but told her not to commit any more crimes, and told Ji-ho the truth and asked for his forgiveness. At this time, Ji-yeon's eyes had already been dyed red with fear and anger, and her eyes were full of murderous intent. The stepmother was terrified, and just as she was about to do it, she tripped over a stone on the ground. In a panic, the stepmother instinctively grabbed Ji-yeon. Hearing Ji-yeon's plea for mercy, the stepmother pulled her up with all her strength, but fell into the sea herself because she was too weak. Ji-yeon thought about how her stepmother was going to tell her husband everything, and finally gave up on calling for help, and even removed the battery from her phone and threw it into the sea. To prevent the police from tracing her phone, Jin-hee hurriedly searched for her mother after learning of her sudden disappearance, and learned from the nurse that she had gone out because her daughter had called. Jin-hee immediately suspected Ji-yeon of doing it, and immediately reported it to the police, and asked them to track the location of Ji-yeon's phone. But Ji-yeon had turned off her phone and the police were unable to do anything. After a day of searching, Jin-hee still couldn't find her mother. She broke down and sat on the ground, crying her heart out. Ji-yeon thought that if she pretended to know nothing, she would be fine. Just then, Officer Park sent her a text message. The text message said that Jin-hee's mother had been found, and she was asked to meet her on the roof. Ji-yeon, who was feeling guilty, didn't hesitate for a second, and hurried to the roof. However, she found that the place was empty. Just as Ji-yeon turned her head, a pair of hands grabbed her neck. Jin-hee mocked Ji-yeon for being so stupid that the same trick could be used on her twice. She had been tricked onto the roof in the same way when she got married last time. Ji-yeon's guilty look convinced Jin-hee that her mother's disappearance was definitely related to her. She questioned Ji-yeon about where she had hidden her mother. Ji-yeon was about to be strangled to death, but she still refused to admit it. Jin-hee kept increasing the strength. Ji-yeon's eyes rolled back in her head as she was choked. Just as she was about to die, Jin-hee's phone suddenly rang. This made her let go of her hand. The call was from the police station, telling her that 2 people had found her mother at the beach, and that she had been taken to the hospital. Before Jin-hee left, she left a warning that one day Ji-yeon and her family would have to kneel down and beg for forgiveness. Ji-yeon was terrified when she learned that her stepmother had been found, and quickly went online to check if there was any news of her death after falling into the sea. Finding nothing, Ji-yeon had no choice but to call Officer Park for help, and ask him to go to the hospital to see if there was any news of her stepmother. Fortunately, Ji-ho had used a fake name to register Jin-hee's mother in hospital in advance, and thus successfully avoided Officer Park's investigation. Jin-hee's mother, who had been revived, once again entered a vegetative state. Jin-hee was grief-stricken and blamed herself for not protecting her mother well. After the sadness passed, the hatred in her heart became stronger. Ji-ho had once promised Jin-hee that she would help her no matter what. This time, Jin-hee was prepared to use the company's cosmetics as a bargaining chip to take revenge. She compiled a file, trying to recruit Julia to help her. Jin-hee promised her that if they collaborated, they would not only get her as a talent, but also the management rights of the company's cosmetics. Julia was shocked when she heard Jin-hee's words, facing such a big piece of meat sent by Jin-hee. Woolwa had no reason to refuse. The next day, she signed an investment contract with First Cosmetics. However, one of the conditions for signing the contract was for Jin-hee to take the position of publicity director. Ji-yeon came back and saw Jin-hee sitting in her seat. She was instantly furious. She told her to leave her seat. Ji-yeon said she was going to get up and pull Jin-hee up. Ji-ho asked her assistant, Ji-yeon, to say that she could not accept this arrangement. Please ask the company to review it. Ji-ho said this was arranged by Julia. It was also a condition of the contract. No one can do anything about it. Ji-yeon still didn't want to accept it. She ran to find Ji-ho. Ji-ho told her to just resign, but Ji-yeon vowed to get her position back, so she had to temporarily work under Jin-hee's subordinate. However, Jin-hee's revenge on her was certainly not limited to this. Jin-hee ordered Ji-yeon to come over for a moment, but Ji-yeon pretended not to hear it. Unexpectedly, the assistant at the door rushed to come. With no choice, Ji-yeon had to accept the arrangement. At this time, she was full of anger, so she cleverly changed the original information. She replaced some of the raw materials with harmful substances, and went to a public phone booth to complain that their company's upcoming shampoo contained harmful substances. Just as Jin-hee was promoting her shampoo on the show, people from the safety bureau suddenly appeared and interrupted her, saying that someone had reported that their shampoo contained harmful substances. They demanded to test the shampoo ingredients. As soon as the words fell, the reporters around them instantly became agitated. But at this time, Ji-yeon was just watching the show. Jin-hee, however, was unruffled. In order to prove that her shampoo was fine, she washed her hair with her own shampoo on the spot, and told them the benefits of this shampoo. Ji-yeon thought she was in a death struggle, because the factory had already produced 100,000 bottles, and saw how she was going to be responsible. However, the test results from the safety bureau made Ji-yeon feel puzzled, because no harmful substances were detected. It turned out that Jin-hee had guessed that Ji-yeon would do something. After confirming that there was something wrong with the order Ji-yeon sent, she promptly contacted the factory, and resent an order with no problems. While Jin-hee's crisis was resolved, Ji-yeon was in an awkward situation. Jin-hee publicly accused Ji-yeon of reporting it. Ji-yeon panicked and quickly denied that she did it. Jin-hee knew that she would not admit it, so she asked the security guard to bring the recording of the report. When Ji-yeon heard the recording, she still tried to argue. Everyone scolded her. Ji-ho couldn't sit still anymore and told Ji-yeon to go up front and apologize to everyone, even though she didn't want to. Ji-yeon was forced to go up and admit her mistake and beg everyone to forgive her, but everyone wanted her to leave the company as soon as possible. Ji-ho felt that Ji-yeon's behavior was so humiliating and angrily told her to resign as soon as possible, but Ji-yeon was not willing to, and even used her grandmother's shares in the company as an excuse to say that no one had the right to kick her out of the company. Ji-ho was really disappointed in Ji-yeon. Woo-hwa was very angry about this incident and told Ji-ho to quickly get Ji-yeon out of the company, but this was not what Jin-hee wanted, and asked them to let her handle Ji-yeon's affairs. After this incident, everyone in the company pointed at Ji-yeon. Jin-hee, on the other hand, became an overnight sensation after a video of her washing her hair with shampoo on a TV show was posted online. As a result, the company unanimously resolved to nominate Jin-hee as the company's model. Ji-yeon not only lost her position as director, but Jin-hee even stole her position as model spokesperson. Ji-yeon's grandmother was furious when she learned of her granddaughter's humiliation. She decided to stand up for Ji-yeon and called the company's two major shareholders to her home to tell them about Jin-hee's criminal record. In an attempt to prevent Jin-hee from becoming a model, Ji-yeon returned home and was scolded by Yuri for doing something harmful to the company's interests and was told to resign immediately. But Ji-yeon acted as if she had done nothing wrong and threatened to take back her position. Jin-hee knew that Ji-yeon would not let this go and would definitely try every means to take her down as a model, so she deliberately set a trap. Ji-yeon soon received a call from a company asking her out to discuss modeling. Ji-yeon readily agreed when she heard it. Seeing the other party's business card, she learned that it was a famous American agency. Ji-yeon could not hide her joy. If they could find the Bled couple to be the company's models, then they could 100% replace Jin-hee's position, because they could be considered superstars in Korea. Seeing Ji-yeon's great interest, the man took the opportunity to throw out the bait, saying that he would get the Bled couple to endorse the company. This made Ji-yeon very excited. In order to confirm the authenticity of the man's identity, Ji-yeon called the company to confirm the man's identity. This completely put her guard down, and then she found Ji-ho, claiming that the shareholders had protested against Jin-hee's role as the company's model, and asking him to consider the option of using a celebrity spokesperson, as this would not only be influential but would also bring huge sales results to the company. However, Ji-ho said that signing a contract with a superstar would cost a lot of money, and if the contract with Jin-hee was terminated, he would have to pay her additional liquidated damages, which would be a huge loss for the company. Ji-ho expressed his disapproval of this approach. However, Ji-yeon was willing to pay out of her own pocket in order to bring Jin-hee down, and said that she would be responsible for the money to hire the star in Jin-hee's breach of contract. If this star strategy is successful, all she has to do is get her investment back. Ji-ho saw that she was so persistent and agreed. Unexpectedly, Ji-yeon had already fallen into the trap set by Jin-hee and the others. After Ji-yeon got Ji-ho's consent, she strutted over to Jin-hee and bragged that the company had decided to use another model, and told her to withdraw voluntarily. But Jin-hee demanded 5 times the amount as compensation. Ji-yeon was reluctant, but in order to prevent Jin-hee from stealing the limelight, she finally agreed to it with a heavy heart. Ji-yeon sold her shares to raise 700 million won in compensation and gave it to Jin-hee, and then tore up Jin-hee's modeling contract in front of her face, saying that she was not qualified to be the company's model, and that she should stop daydreaming. Jin-hee, however, just laughed at this, because she wanted to see how long Ji-yeon could keep smiling. After Ji-yeon took Jin-hee's modeling position, she had to find a way to raise the signing bonus for the Bled couple. Ji-yeon had no choice but to ask the agency to sell the property. However, the other party said that if they were in a hurry to sell, the price would be reduced by 30%. Ji-yeon had no choice but to agree. Jin-hee immediately told Yoo-jun about the news. Yoo-jun had long coveted Ji-yeon's land. He immediately instructed his subordinates to buy the land under his name. Ji-yeon's sold shares were also bought by Woo-hwa. Ji-yeon raised 3 billion won in capital and cheerfully signed the contract with the man. However, on the day she was to start her endorsement campaign, a colleague hurriedly came to tell her that the passenger list did not include the Bleds. Ji-yeon's face instantly changed when she heard the news, and hurriedly called the man. However, it showed that the other party could not answer the phone. Ji-yeon didn't know what to do for a moment. A colleague came over to tell her that the reporters were all waiting outside, and asked her when she could enter. She kept calling but couldn't get through. Ji-yeon then realized that she had been scammed. For a moment, she couldn't accept this blow. Jin-hee, on the other hand, donated Ji-yeon's 3 billion won signing bonus to an organization for missing children. In the hope of helping some families with lost children, Ji-yeon came to the roof in a daze, and thought about how she had not only lost that prime piece of land, but also most of the company's shares. Under the huge blow, she had a hallucination. Her mind was full of people accusing her of words. Ji-yeon then knew what despair was. After calming down, she went to the police station to report the case, asking the police to help her recover the 3 billion funds. The police, however, said that the other party had planned in advance, so there was no way they would leave a trace. Ji-yeon returned to the office and saw Jin-hee before she woke up, suspecting that this was all a trick by Jin-hee, but she had no evidence. She could only scream and vent her anger. Watching the emotional Ji-yeon, Jin-hee did not feel the least bit angry, but instead felt very happy in her heart. In the end, because Ji-yeon was defrauded, Jin-hee still became their model. Sales of the new product also rose steadily. Not only that, Jin-hee even replaced Ji-yeon as the lecturer for beauty, which made Ji-yeon feel so angry that she wanted to lose her mind. Back at the company, Ji-ho again made her compensate for the company's losses. Because of her reckless actions, the company's reputation has been affected. Ji-yeon was so angry, but there was nothing she could do, and Jin-hee's revenge on her didn't stop there. As soon as Ji-yeon left the office, she received an anonymous text message. The sender claimed to know what she had done on the cliff that day. This scared her to death. Ji-yeon hurriedly called Officer Park and asked him if he had just sent a text message. Officer Park said he didn't have the time for that. Ji-yeon was panicking, worrying that what she had done that day had been seen, so she hurriedly found her father. Unexpectedly, her father also received the same text message. Her father questioned Ji-yeon if she had done something to Jin-hee's mother again. Ji-yeon saw that she could not hide it anymore and had to confess the truth to her father. Her father felt that his daughter was really hopeless. Ji-yeon told her father that the man had sent another message, asking her to meet him at the park at 6 p.m. She decided to solve the problem before Ji-ho found out about it. But what Ji-yeon didn't know was that Ji-ho also received the same message, and told Ji-ho the location of the transaction with Ji-yeon. In the park, the fat girl disguised herself and waited with a video camera for the bait to appear. It turned out that this was all a plan between Wool-hwa and Ji-ho. In this way, they could determine whether Ji-yeon was involved with Jin-hee's mother. Ji-yeon arrived at the park as scheduled to make the transaction. Ji-ho also happened to come over to find out the truth behind this. Ji-ho showed Ji-yeon the message and asked her to explain why she was there. Ji-yeon still refused to admit it in the face of Ji-ho's questioning, and lied, saying that she had also received a message and came here to find out who was joking. But Ji-ho didn't believe it at all. Unexpectedly, the next second, Ji-yeon's father came with 2 policemen and told Ji-ho that he had also received that ridiculous threatening text message and said that someone must have maliciously disrupted their family harmony. And the father and daughter sang in unison to fool Ji-ho. But the next day Ji-yeon received another threatening text message saying that they had footage of her on the cliff that day and that they would upload it to the internet if they didn't pay. This completely panicked Ji-yeon. In order to prevent the video from being uploaded and reported, Ji-yeon had no choice but to hurry and transfer money to the other party, and all of this was also within Jin-hee's plan. She wanted to get Ji-yeon's remittance record in order to settle the matter as evidence. Then Jin-hee used anonymity to tell Ji-ho about Ji-yeon's remittance. This made Ji-ho suspicious of Ji-yeon again. He immediately went home to look for Ji-yeon's remittance record. However, while he was rummaging, Ji-yeon's phone suddenly rang. Ji-ho saw that it was an international call and picked it up. A little boy's voice came from the other end of the phone, unaware that the boy was his biological son. Ji-ho was about to ask him who he was when the boy's adoptive mother snatched the phone away, claiming that the prices here were really high and that he should send more money next time. Ji-ho was puzzled when Ji-yeon suddenly entered the room and found Ji-ho answering his own phone. He panicked instantly, worried that Ji-ho would find out something, and immediately snatched the phone away. Ji-ho asked her what she meant by sending living expenses to the UK. Ji-yeon immediately lied that she had met a child by chance, because her family was relatively poor, so she had been supporting them, hoping that in this way she could do good deeds and see if she could move heaven so that she could conceive a child again. This lie moved Ji-ho, who didn't know the truth. Jin-hee was walking on the street that day when she met a mother who was anxiously looking for her child. She had lost her child before and could understand her feelings, so she took the initiative to ask about the child's characteristics and then helped her look for him. Soon, Jin-hee helped the woman find her child. The mother's heart was finally set at ease. Jin-hee told her that she had had a child before and could understand how she felt. Jin-hee's words were overheard by Ji-yeon's grandmother, who happened to be passing by. She was instantly shocked. She approached Jin-hee and asked if the child she had given birth to was Ji-ho's. Jin-hee asked her to talk about it somewhere else. Ji-yeon had originally arranged to meet her grandmother at a cafe. However, she had not seen her grandmother's figure for a long time. She called to ask, but did not expect Jin-hee to answer the phone. Ji-yeon instantly became nervous and worried that Jin-hee would take revenge on her because of her mother and do something to her grandmother. she immediately called Officer Park and said that Jin Hee had kidnapped her grandmother and asked him to find Jin Hee by any means necessary. Then she told her father about it and asked him to call the police. Her father told her to calm down and then called Jin Hee to ask what she wanted so that she could not harm the elderly. Jin Hee said that Ji Yun had treated her mother like that at the beginning and then hung up. Ji Yun was worried and immediately called Ji Ho to say that Jin Hee had kidnapped her grandmother. Subsequently, Officer Park told Ji Yun that he had tracked down Jin Hee at the hospital and that he would send 2 policemen there to assist. It turned out that Jin Hee had told Ji Yun's grandmother that she would give birth to the baby in prison and that the baby was still Ji Ho's. Ji Yun's grandmother was furious after hearing this and cursed Jin Hee shamelessly. Jin Hee told her that the child was sent to the UK by Ji Yun and died in a fire. The grandmother couldn't believe that her granddaughter had done such a vicious thing and fainted on the spot due to her emotional state and high blood pressure. Jin Hee then took her to the hospital for treatment. When the grandmother woke up, she still didn't believe that Ji Yun had done it and told Jin Hee not to say anything. As soon as Ji Yun entered the ward, she questioned Jin Hee about what she had done to her grandmother. Jin Hee ignored her and was about to leave. Ji Yun quickly asked the police to arrest Jin Hee for kidnapping her grandmother. Luckily, her grandmother still had some humanity left in her and told the police that Jin Hee had done nothing and that she had only been taken to the hospital because she had suddenly fainted. Ji Yun was very disappointed to hear this. She wanted to take this opportunity to send Jin Hee to prison again. After Jin Hee left, Grandma asks Ji Yun if it is true that Jin Hee's child was sent abroad. After getting a definite answer, Grandma almost fainted again. Ji Yun quickly reassured Grandma that the child is still alive. It's just that Officer Park took it upon himself to forge a fake certificate. He wanted Jin Hee to give up the idea of finding the child, although the child is not dead. Grandma still feels that Ji Yun should not have done such a thing against nature. This is her husband's child. She should take the child back. Ji Yun also asked her grandmother to keep the secret for her. Jin Hee and Ji Ho must never find out. Her grandmother was also at her wits' end. Yoo-jun and Suya were also trying hard to find the car mechanic from 5 years ago, but to no avail. In order to find evidence of the car accident, Yoo-jun discussed with Jin Hee and the others that he would go to Officer Park's residence to look for clues. Jin Hee immediately thought of a way. She opened Ji Yun's drawer and took some hair from her brush. While Yoo-jun and the others were searching Officer Park's home, Jin Hee left this hair at the scene. Ji Yun received a fax at the office about her remittance and was scared and at a loss for what to do. She hurriedly ran out to consult with her father. After discussing it, both father and daughter felt that Officer Park was responsible, so they confronted Officer Park face to face. They said that it wasn't enough for him to take so much money, and threatened to fax the remittance to the company again. Officer Park finally understood what it felt like to be wronged. He warned the father and daughter that they better not mess with him, or he would send Ji Yun to jail, and left angrily. When Officer Park returned home, he was furious at the sight in front of him. He immediately suspected Jin Hee of doing it, but then saw the hair left on the table. Officer Park immediately realized it was Ji Yun, who had dared to play dirty. Then don't blame me for being rude. That day, Woolwa was invited to Ji Ho's home by Ji Ho. As soon as she entered the door, an inexplicable sense of familiarity welled up in her heart, as if she had been here before, and even her long-lost children seemed to have appeared in this house. The sudden memory made her feel a little dizzy. Fortunately, Ji Ho came forward in time to support Woolwa. What she didn't know was that Ji Ho was her long-lost biological son. Then Ji Ho's mother came out to greet her. Woolwa stared with shocked eyes, because it felt as if she had seen her somewhere before. After that, Woolwa was distracted. After dinner, Ji Ho volunteered to walk her home. However, on the way home, Woolwa's mind kept flashing back to some images, which caused her to have a terrible headache. Ji Ho heard Woolwa's painful screams, and hurriedly turned back to ask if she was okay. When Ji Ho turned back, he almost collided with the car in front of him. He immediately turned the steering wheel to the right. Unexpectedly, he still hit the bushes on the side of the road. Ji Ho got up and saw Woolwa pass out, and rushed her to the hospital. However, this crash actually made Woolwa remember everything. It turned out that she and Yuri were supposed to be good friends, but Yuri wanted to take the place of her mistress. So while her husband and children were abroad, she sent the driver to trick Woolwa into the wilderness. Then she locked the car door and wanted her to die in the fire. She even made it look like she had eloped with someone. Fortunately, Woolwa was rescued halfway, but because she had suffered extensive burns, she eventually underwent skin grafting and plastic surgery, so that no one would recognize her. When Woolwa woke up, she looked at her biological son in front of her and her emotions instantly flared up. She was so choked up that she could not speak, and she desperately patted her chest. Her son was in front of her, but she did not dare to recognize him. Due to her emotional outburst, Woolwa fainted again. Everyone thought that she was just in shock. The next day, Ji Yun wanted to help Ji Ho make up for her mistake in the car accident. She made a nutritious soup and visited Woolwa, but Woolwa knew all the crimes Ji Yun had committed, including the fact that she had caused her daughter Ji Won's death. Thinking about this, Woolwa angrily knocked over the nutritious food Ji Yun had brought. Ji Yun, who had been driven away, was at a loss for a moment, and quickly rolled out of the ward. Woo-wah then told Jin-hee to go back first, and that she wanted to be alone. In the quiet of the night, Woo-wah recalls the happy moments she had with her children 20 years ago, and the past she shared with Ji-ho. She hates herself for not being able to recognize her son, and cries sadly. However, what hurts him even more is that his daughter has already passed away. Woo-wah's first move after being discharged from the hospital is to ask her secretary to find her daughter's memorial tablet. Looking at her daughter's portrait, Woo-wah instantly falls into sadness. The secretary rushes over upon hearing the sound, telling her not to get so excited. After Julia calmed down a little, she asked her secretary to call Jin-hee over. She just wanted to find out who had killed her daughter. Jin-hee didn't understand why Woo-wah suddenly brought this up, but she still played the recording for her. After listening to the recording, Woo-wah also believed that Ji-won was not hit by Jin-hee. She also said that she would fully support what she wanted to do. She also wanted to see those people fall miserably. At this moment, this revenge is no longer Jin-hee's personal business. Jin-hee is puzzled by Julia's change. Woo-wah then finds Ji-ho and tries to find out his views on his biological mother. Ji-ho has always believed that his mother abandoned him and his sister because she eloped with someone else. In his heart, he has never been able to forgive his own biological mother. After hearing Ji-ho say this, Woo-wah decides to temporarily conceal her identity until everything returns to the way it was. Woo-wah then went to the house that originally belonged to her and saw the woman who had taken over everything in her sight. Woo-wah wanted to kill her. However, all of this was just her imagination. It was not the time to reveal Yuri yet. Yuri, in order to please Woo-wah, directly proposed to live in their house until her house was renovated. Woo-wah also thought so. She would slowly take back everything that belonged to her. Jin-hee, as Woo-wah's representative, naturally followed. Ji-yeon really didn't want to see Jin-hee, but in this household she didn't have any say, and Yuri naturally agreed wholeheartedly to please Woo-wah, a VIP guest, which was a blessing in her life. Unbeknownst to Yuri, her nightmare had just begun. During dinner, Woo-wah, relying on her status as an investor, began to make things difficult for Yuri, asking her to fetch tea and water for her, and then deliberately dropping cutlery on the floor, and asked Yuri to get her a new set of tableware. Later, she complained that the soup she made was not tasty, and treated her like a maid. Although Yuri was angry, she had to do as she was told, because she needed Woo-wah to keep Ji-ho's position as the company president. After dinner, Jin-hee was worried that Woo-wah would not be comfortable living there, and suggested that she move to another place if she was not satisfied. However, Woo-wah said that she did not know where else to live if she did not live in her own home, which made Jin-hee feel puzzled. But Woo-wah had no intention of telling her her identity. Then Yuri received a phone call, and was told that her son had been in a car accident, and was now in the hospital fighting for his life. Yuri panicked upon hearing the news, and hurriedly ran out of the house, intending to drive to the hospital, but the car would not start. At that moment, she received a text message on her phone, which read, "Have a safe trip." Yuri was so scared that she wanted to open the car door and leave, but the door was already locked, and she realized that she had been tricked. Before long, Yuri was surrounded by a raging fire. She desperately shouted for help from inside the car. Woo-wah was watching her from afar. She had deliberately arranged it all. She had once been trapped in a car herself. In desperation and fear, she had screamed her lungs out. She wanted Yuri to experience the feeling of being burned alive. Just as Woo-wah thought Yuri was doomed, unexpectedly Ji-ho returned home, seeing his stepmother in danger. Ji-ho, who didn't like her, still saved Yuri without hesitation. Woo-wah didn't expect that it was her own son who saved her. In the end, Yuri was sent to the hospital for treatment. She was in a state of shock and couldn't recover for a long time. Ji-ho, who had received the news, hurried to the hospital, anxiously asking what had happened. Ji-ho told Ji-ho about the accident. Yuri said that someone had deliberately done this to her. Ji-ho asked her mother the reason, puzzled, but Yuri didn't know how to answer. At that moment, the phone suddenly received a text message. The content indicated that "My son saved you." Yuri's panic-stricken look instantly aroused the suspicion of her two sons, but no matter how Ji-ho asked, her mother just wouldn't tell the truth. Jin-hee also finally had the opportunity to take revenge on her stepfather, because Grandma Ji-yeon was unwilling to let her son idle at home all day, and tried to get her son a position in politics. She went to great lengths to get tickets to high-end parties. Only people of status are allowed in. Jin-hee and Woo-wah decide to take this opportunity to empty Ji-yeon's grandmother's shares. However, coincidentally, Lawyer Min is also on the list of candidates for the upcoming parliamentary election. Ji-yeon's father and Lawyer Min are bound to fight each other in this election. Jin-hee intends to take advantage of the two men's mutual hostility to collect evidence of their illegal activities 5 years ago. At this gathering, Woo-wah intervenes as an investor. So if you want to be elected to Congress, you must first pass her. Learning that Jin-hee is Woo-wah's right-hand man, Ji-yeon's grandmother looks disdainful, while Ji-yeon's father instantly fell into anxiety. As expected, when the representative of the National Assembly introduced Ji-yeon's father as a new member, Woo-wah immediately angrily accused them of having a low standard of gathering, and told everyone about the scandalous things Ji-yeon's father had done before. Woo-wah's words caused an uproar in the room. In the end, the congressman's campaign was forced to be delayed due to her opposition. In order to help Ji-yeon's father enter politics smoothly, Ji-yeon's grandmother tried to persuade Woo-wah to agree to her son's election as a congressman, and Julia's attitude also changed in order to realize Jin-hee's revenge plan. She apologized to Ji-yeon's father for what happened at the party, and also said that he is the most suitable candidate. Just as the old lady is happy, Jin-hee suddenly arrives at the meeting room. Julia takes the opportunity to ask Jin-hee for her opinion. Jin-hee, of course, opposes her stepfather's candidacy for the position of Member of Parliament. How can someone who was dismissed due to bribery be recommended? After listening to Jin-hee's words, the mood of the grandmother and stepfather instantly fell. Woo-wah said that since the assistant said so, there was nothing she could do. The assistant's opinion is equivalent to her opinion. Jin-hee has suddenly become a crucial decision-maker in this parliamentary election. At this time, Jeannie's child was taken back to the country by her foster mother, because her foster mother had to take care of her sick mother, and had no choice but to entrust the child to Ji-yeon's care, and Ji-yeon could only take Jerry back to her parents' house. Father and grandmother were surprised to see the child's face. Unexpectedly, at this time, Jin-hee happened to visit with Woo-wah, which scared Ji-yeon. She hurriedly took Jerry upstairs and hid him. Then Grandma and Dad nervously welcomed the two into the house. After chatting for a while in the living room, Grandma suggested that the two go into the room to chat in private. She wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of them and help Ji-yeon cover up. After hearing no more noise downstairs, Ji-yeon quickly sneaked out of the house with Jerry. Unexpectedly, this scene was witnessed by Officer Park. As they were about to leave, Jerry told Ji-yeon that the painting she gave him had fallen next to the sofa. Ji-yeon panicked and secretly returned to the house and found the painting next to the sofa. She was relieved that Jin-hee had not discovered it, or she would have become suspicious. Jin-hee missed the opportunity to reunite with her son. When Ji-yeon came out again, she found that Jerry was gone. At this time, Jerry was in Officer Park's car. At this time, Ji-yeon called. Officer Park directly told her to take Jerry to meet Ji-ho. Ji-yeon was panic-stricken. She didn't understand Officer Park's intentions. Ji-yeon rushed home to stop Ji-ho from meeting Jerry, but it was too late. Jerry had already arrived at the house and met Ji-ho face-to-face. Ji-yeon also rushed home shortly after. There was no choice but for Ji-yeon to tell Ji-ho that this was the child she had been sponsoring, but Ji-ho liked the little boy in front of him. Then when the three of them went out to eat, Ji-ho discovered that Jerry doesn't like cucumbers, just like himself, and didn't know that this was his biological son. Ji-yeon saw that Ji-ho liked Jerry so much, so she suggested to him that they adopt a child. But Ji-ho didn't want to get too involved with Ji-yeon, so when they were returning from dinner, a balloon suddenly rolled out onto the road. Jerry followed the balloon out of curiosity and chased after it to the middle of the road. When he saw that the cars were about to crash, luckily, Ji-ho rushed forward and protected Jerry under his body. Ji-ho tried to comfort him and not be afraid, and then played with Jerry. Ji-yeon saw the heartwarming scene between the father and son and had mixed feelings. If Jerry was born to her, that would be great. Then they could live a happy life together. Jin-hee hovered between her stepfather and Lawyer Min in order to find evidence to frame him. She guessed that Lawyer Min would definitely do something in order to get elected to the National Assembly, and asked the reporter who was helping her to secretly follow Lawyer Min. Sure enough, Lawyer Min was caught on camera taking a bribe. After learning this news, Jin-hee promptly disguised herself as a taxi driver and took the initiative to ask them if they wanted to call a designated driver. The two, who were drunk, got into Jin-hee's car without knowing that she had already installed a surveillance camera in the car. Lawyer Min, because he was drunk, told everything about taking bribes. The scene of him stuffing money in his pocket was also recorded by Jin-hee. After obtaining evidence of Lawyer Min's guilt, the reporter couldn't wait to report Lawyer Min, but was stopped by Jin-hee. Jin-hee also deliberately exaggerated the words they said to denigrate each other in front of the two. Sure enough, both were afraid that the other's one-sided words would ruin their careers, so they both came to Woo-wah's office in order to collect evidence of their crimes. Jin-hee then made an excuse to leave the office. Unexpectedly, as soon as she left, the two started arguing. In desperation, Lawyer Min revealed that he had helped Ji-yeon's father frame Jin-hee 5 years ago. After collecting evidence against the two, Jin-hee called Ji-yeon's grandmother and deliberately revealed that Lawyer Min was using money to influence the situation. She said that her son's chances were slim. Ji-yeon's grandmother instantly flew into a rage. She also wanted to use money to help her son influence the situation. She secretly met with the representative of the elected members of parliament. Unexpectedly, Ji-yeon's grandmother's bribery scene was captured on evidence by a detective arranged by Jin-hee in advance. According to the detective, the bribe amount was at least 2 billion won. Jin-hee guessed that her grandmother must have sold some of her shares, so she immediately asked Woo-wah's secretary to buy Ji-yeon's grandmother's shares. After Jin-hee obtained the evidence of her stepfather 5 years ago and the evidence of her grandmother's bribery, Lawyer Min was no longer useful. Jin Hee then arranged for a reporter to expose Lawyer Min's bribery scandal. Soon after, Lawyer Min was arrested by the police for bribery, and upon hearing the news that Lawyer Min had been imprisoned, Ji-yeon's father and Ji-yeon's grandmother looked overjoyed. With no more competition, Ji-yeon's father was finally elected to the National Assembly. This was what Jin Hee had wanted most, because the higher you climb, the harder you fall. One day, Ji-ho found a necklace that he had once given to Jin Hee in his wife's drawer. Just as he wondered why the necklace was here, his wife's reaction was extremely unusual. The moment Ji-yeon saw the necklace, he let out a terrified expression, and was so scared that the plate in his hand fell directly to the ground, because this necklace was given to his son by Jin Hee when they parted ways. However, after Ji-yeon switched the children, he took off the necklace and kept it in a drawer at home. Facing Ji-ho's questioning, Ji-yeon lied again, and said that Jin Hee felt that the necklace was meaningless and wanted to get rid of it, and finally asked Jin Hee to give it to her. Ji-ho's heart ached after hearing this, and felt that Jin Hee had forgotten the good times they had had together, while Ji-yeon took advantage of Ji-ho's days to immediately stuff the necklace into the drawer, and quickly picked up the things on the floor to escape the room, for fear that Ji-ho would ask one more question and expose the truth, and prayed in her heart that Ji-ho would not confront Jin Hee with the necklace, in which case Jin Hee would naturally know that she had taken the son away. And on Jin Hee's side, she discovered that Woolwa's list of people looking for their sons included Ji-ho's name, which shocked her. After questioning Woolwa, she also admitted that Ji-ho was her biological son, and said that she had recovered all her memories, and knew that the person who framed her in the first place was Ji-ho's mother. Woolwa asked Jin Hee to join forces with her, and make those selfish people pay the price they deserve, which made Jin Hee hesitate, because Ji-ho had made his feelings clear to her, and even proposed to her. Ji-ho truly and sincerely loved Jin Hee, but Jin Hee did not love him at the moment. She did not want to use Ji-ho to get married for the sake of revenge, and planned to refuse Ji-ho's proposal. However, Ji-ho stopped Jin Hee's hand as she was returning the ring. He didn't care what Jin Hee's purpose of getting married was. Jin Hee persuaded him not to do something he would regret. Ji-ho was not afraid of regretting, but afraid of missing Jin Hee. Jin Hee thought about it for a long time at night. She chose to slowly accept this relationship. She hoped that she would really fall in love with Ji-ho someday. The next day, Ji-ho took Jin Hee home and announced his proposal. Jin Hee, because of Woolwa's support, Yuri also agreed with the marriage. At that moment, Ji-yeon returned from outside. Yuri immediately asked Ji-yeon to greet Jin Hee, and said bluntly that Jin Hee would be her sister-in-law in the future. This sudden address left Ji-yeon speechless, and she angrily left directly. Yuri saw that Ji-yeon dared to ignore her as a mother-in-law, so she ran directly to Ji-yeon's room, and rebuked her for her lack of manners. In front of her face, she warned Ji-yeon that if she did it again, she would not let her go. Ji-yeon was at a loss for words and could only stare at her. Yuri also told Ji-ho that he was going to marry Jin Hee. Ji-ho also couldn't believe it. His former fiancée had now become his sister-in-law. He felt very uncomfortable in his heart, so he took the necklace he had given Jin Hee and went to the river. He recalled the good times they had together. After some struggle, Ji-ho still asked Jin Hee to meet him at a cafe, and said that no matter if Jin Hee chose to marry for love or revenge, he would give her his blessings. Then Ji-ho took out the necklace and placed it on the table, and said again, since I promised to wait for you forever at the beginning, I was unable to do so in the end. I hope you can be happy by Ji-ho's side. At this time, Jin Hee simply could not hear what Ji-ho was saying. Her eyes were full of the necklace on the table. The necklace worn by her son was here. She asked Ji-ho excitedly where she got the necklace. Ji-ho said, "Isn't this the necklace you gave Ji-yeon?" Jin Hee clutched the necklace in her hand. She bluntly told him that he did not give the necklace to Ji-yeon. Then she got up and left. Jin Hee looked at the necklace in her hand. She finally determined that Ji-yeon was the one who caused her son's death, so she immediately called Ji-yeon out. She asked her where she got the necklace, but Ji-yeon did not answer Jin Hee's question, but anxiously asked Jin Hee what she had told Ji-ho, and whether she had said that they had a child together, for fear that Ji-ho would abandon her if she knew about the child. Jin Hee was completely infuriated, and raised her hand to give Ji-yeon a hard slap. Then she turned around and was about to go tell Ji-ho. Ji-yeon was completely panicked and grabbed Jin Hee, and apologized to her, saying that she was willing to be punished, but asked her not to tell Ji-ho. Jin Hee flung her away and left directly. Ji-yeon hurriedly chased after her. Jin Hee looked at the unmoving Ji-yeon with a shocked face. Although she hated Ji-yeon to the bone, driven by her conscience, she took Ji-yeon to the hospital. But that doesn't mean Jin Hee forgave her. Does she think that a little injury can make up for the pain she has endured for 5 years? Jin Hee will make her pay for what she did to her mother and son. Hearing this, Ji-yeon stopped pretending. She humbly knelt before Jin Hee and admitted her mistakes. She also told Jin Hee the whole story about how she abducted her son from the orphanage. The only thing she didn't tell Jin Hee was that her son was still alive. After she finished, she begged Jin Hee to forgive her. After listening to Ji-yeon's confession, Jin Hee tried to suppress her anger and was about to leave the room. Unexpectedly, Ji-yeon hugged her thighs and kept begging Jin-hee not to tell Ji-ho about the son. Looking at such a selfish Ji-yeon, Jin-hee said that she had already gotten the answer she wanted and left without looking back. Unexpectedly, Ji-yeon just confessed everything was recorded by Jin-hee. When the time is ripe, this will surely become a sword to punish Ji-yeon. Although Jin-hee did not tell Ji-ho about her son, but Ji-ho had already become suspicious after seeing Jerry last time. In order to find out Jerry's identity, Ji-ho asked Yoo-jun for help. Yoo-jun gave him the photos taken by following Officer Park. Learning that Jerry was the one Officer Park brought to their house, Ji-ho then asked Officer Park out and asked him how he knew Jerry. Officer Park made up a random excuse. Ji-ho didn't say anything on the surface, but deep down he didn't believe it. After returning home, Ji-ho searched her room for clues about the two. Sure enough, Ji-ho found Ji-yeon's bankbook in a drawer. It clearly recorded that starting from the year of her sister's car accident, Ji-yeon had successively remitted several sums of money to Officer Park. Each sum was as high as tens of millions of won. Seeing these remittance records, Ji-ho's eyes were filled with anger. At this time, she received another call from her father-in-law, telling him that Ji-yeon had hurt her leg and asking him to come over and take Ji-yeon home. Unexpectedly, Yoo-ri also suddenly arrived. However, when Ji-ho arrived, he overheard Ji-yeon's grandmother talking to Yoo-ri because Ji-yeon's father had someone secretly investigate her past. Yoo-ri felt very uncomfortable, so Yoo-ri told Ji-yeon about the fake suicide note. Ji-ho then woke up to the truth. Ji-yeon had been deceiving him for a long time. He had been blinded by Ji-yeon's lies. Thinking about this, he wished he could slap himself hard. Ji-ho did not take Ji-yeon back, but went to see Yoo-jun instead. He told Yoo-jun to tell him everything he knew. Yoo-jun did not hide anything from Ji-ho. He told Ji-ho about Ji-yeon hurting Jin-hee's mother and forging her will, and told Ji-ho that the reason Ji-yeon wanted to hurt Jin-hee's mother was because Jin-hee's mother was the one who knew about all of Ji-yeon's crimes. Ji-ho knew about Ji-yeon's crimes but did not expose her in time. Instead, he had someone install a surveillance camera in the room. He wanted to know if his sister's death was also related to Ji-yeon. After doing everything, Ji-ho took Ji-yeon back home, and then he deliberately made an excuse to leave and left his wife alone in the room. Ji-ho had just left when Ji-yeon got on the phone with her grandmother and told her everything about how she had deliberately crashed her car to stop Jin-hee during the day. Little did she know that her phone call was being monitored. Ji-ho learned that Ji-yeon was close with Officer Park and asked him out for a drink. Ji-ho confided in him about her miserable life, and Officer Park was at a loss for what to do. Then Ji-ho pretended to get drunk. Officer Park called Ji-yeon to come pick him up. Ji-yeon learned that her husband was with Officer Park and rushed over, ignoring her injured foot. Ji-yeon found Ji-ho unconscious and unrestrainedly questioned Officer Park if he had said anything to her husband. Officer Park said he hadn't said anything, and then told Ji-yeon about the time she hit Ji-won. Officer Park questioned her, saying, "Aren't you ashamed of living with Ji-ho?" Ji-ho heard this and tried hard to control his anger. He remembered what Ji-yeon had told him. He had mistaken the person he loved for his sister's murderer. He felt remorseful at this moment. Ji-ho, who knew the truth, did not expose Ji-yeon. He wanted to prepare more evidence to help Jin-hee clear her name. Meanwhile, Woolwa did not stop her revenge on Yoo-ri. She deliberately took Yoo-ri to a bar and bragged to her that the bar business was booming and she could easily earn billions of won a month. In an attempt to convince Yoo-ri to invest in opening a bar, Yoo-ri thought about it for a few days and finally couldn't resist Woolwa's temptation and decided to give it a try. But opening a bar requires a lot of money, and Yoo-ri didn't have that kind of money lying around. Woolwa said she could help solve the funding problem, so Woolwa went to Yoo-jun's company and told her the truth about being Ji-won's biological mother and how Yoo-ri had caused her to lose her son in the past, and asked Yoo-jun to help her ruin Yoo-ri. After learning that Woolwa was his mother-in-law, Yoo-jun did not hesitate for a second and chose to stand by Woolwa's side, although he felt that he had wronged Ji-ho. After Ji-won's tragic death for no reason, his life has been about nothing but revenge. Early the next morning, Yoo-jun brought an investor to introduce Yoo-ri to him. The investor said that because of Yoo-jun's reputation, he could lend Yoo-ri 6 billion won. Yoo-ri was overjoyed to hear that she could borrow such a large sum of money. She stuttered and asked if it was true. The investor said that as long as the repayment was made on time, there would be no problem. Yoo-ri thought that if she opened a bar, she could make tens of millions of won a day. Naturally, she would be able to repay the loan, so she readily agreed. So she went to the bar to prepare to sign the contract. They deliberately wrote the contract in English so Yoo-ri couldn't understand it, although Yoo-ri was a little suspicious. Under the fake boss's sweet talk and Yoo-jun's encouragement, Yoo-ri finally couldn't resist the temptation of money and successfully signed the contract with the fake boss. Yoo-ri called the bar as the new manager and told the other party that she was the new owner of the bar and that she would come to take over the bar in a couple of days. The manager of the bar found this strange and explained the situation to the president. The president directly stated that their bar had not been sold. Yoo-ri angrily ran to the bar, but found that the president she signed the contract with was not the same person. The president asked Yoo-ri to directly check the contract. contract. After the lawyer brought by the president carefully verified it, the lawyer told Yuri that the contract was fake. Yuri, who heard this, could not believe it, and even asked the lawyer to be responsible for what he said to her. Yuri then immediately called the other party to confirm, but the phone could not be connected. At this time, the secretary also came over to report that she went to pick up the person who signed the contract, but the office had long been deserted. Yuri then realized that she had been defrauded and couldn't accept the blow for a while, so she fainted. After regaining her senses, Yuri called Yoojun to her home that night and questioned him what was going on. Yoojun said that he was only responsible for matchmaking and had clearly told his mother-in-law to carefully check the contract and quickly absolved himself of responsibility. An angry Yuri grabs Yoojun by the collar and scolds him for being heartless, for conspiring with others to deceive her, and demands that Yoojun pay her back the money. No matter how Yuri scolds Yoojun, he remains silent. In the end, Yuri has to accept the fact that she has been cheated because she has no money to pay the interest. The loan sharks came to their door to collect the debt and trashed their home. Jiho came out and promised to pay his mother's debt. The debt collectors gave him a 2-day deadline. Jiho doesn't understand why the loan sharks are at their door. Yuri has no choice but to tell Jiho about Yoojun's loan. Jiho then goes to find Yoojun and asks him why he didn't consult him first. Yoojun says that his mother-in-law asked him to keep it a secret. While the two are arguing, Jiho suddenly receives a call from the police. He is told that the person who set fire to his mother's car has been arrested. Jiho went to the police station and asked the man to tell him who had instructed him, but the man did not name Wulwa. The police had no choice but to detain him there. Jiho, in order to help his mother pay off her debts, asked someone to sell 7 million shares on his behalf. He raised 6 billion won to resolve the debt crisis. After Wulwa learned this news, he immediately sent his secretary to buy Jiho's shares. After listening to the conversation between the two, Jinhee was instantly shocked. She could not help but feel some sympathy for Jiho. She didn't want to see Jiho get hurt. After all, he was innocent. Jiho was on his way to the company with Wulwa when he suddenly received a call from the police. The arson suspect had been persuaded and was willing to confess to the mastermind behind the incident. Seeing this, Wulwa said that he wanted to go with him to take a look. As soon as the man saw Jiho arrive, he prayed that Jiho would let him go. He was willing to tell who the mastermind was. Just as the man was about to speak, Wulwa suddenly appeared behind Jiho, and the man shut up immediately, as he trembled with fear. It turned out that Wulwa had told the man that if he betrayed her after receiving her money, she would make him disappear completely. When Jiho asked the man again who the person behind it all was, the man immediately changed his attitude and said he didn't know anything, before curling up into a ball. Jiho was helpless. Jinhee sees through everything, but she can't say anything. He feels a little bad about it, so he finds Wulwa and asks if Yuri's arson case is related to her. This is considered attempted murder, but Wulwa doesn't care. She just wants Yuri to be punished. She hopes her son can be happy. Wulwa feels that Jiho and Jinhee have not forgotten each other. She lets them start over. Jinhee said that she would never go back to Jiho in order to hide the truth. Wulwa instructed her assistant to give the man a note. The note told him how he could get out. If Yuri went to the police station the next day, tell Yuri that you want to tell her son about her past. If she tells where Hyri is, she will definitely agree to a settlement. Sure enough, the next day when Yuri arrived at the police station, the man told her these words. When she learned that the man had Hyri's whereabouts, Yuri was shocked. She immediately signed a settlement with the man. However, Yuri asked the man to take her to Hyri. Unexpectedly, the man took advantage of Yuri's phone call and escaped. Jiho was surprised to learn that his mother had let the arsonist go. He questioned his mother about what she was hiding from him. The recent events made him feel that there was more to it. However, no matter how Jiho asked, Yuri was unwilling to reveal the sins she committed 20 years ago. Jiho decided to find out the truth himself. Yoojun and Suya also found the place where Ji-yeon had repaired the car after hitting Ji-won. The two showed the mechanic a photo of Ji-yeon and Officer Park and asked if he had seen this person. The mechanic immediately said that he knew the woman in the photo. At that time, she said that she had hit a utility pole and caused the car to break down. After Yoojun's sincere pleading, the mechanic promised to testify on Jinhee's behalf during the retrial. Yoojun cleared up his misunderstanding about Jinhee, and then went to Ji-won's memorial tablet and wept bitterly. Suya comforted him silently. Then Yoojun also told Jiho all the testimony that the car mechanic had investigated. Jiho couldn't wait to send Ji-yeon to jail immediately, but unfortunately, they had enough evidence in their hands. Yoojun guessed that Officer Park must have evidence on him. In order to get the evidence, they set a trap for Officer Park. They asked someone to deliberately cause a fake car accident. Officer Park rushed to the scene of the accident and told him that the vehicle involved in the accident had fled. Then they sent someone pretending to be the perpetrator's brother and offered him 5 million to help settle the matter. Sure enough, Officer Park took the bait as soon as he saw the money and quickly put it in his pocket. Unexpectedly, His bribery was already caught on surveillance. Then Yoo-jun took the video and threatened Officer Park to hand over the evidence of the car accident that year, or he would hand over the video to the police. Officer Park then realized that he had been tricked. He lied and said that he had not left any evidence that year. Unexpectedly, Yoo-jun had already sent someone to follow him, and knew that the evidence was hidden in his vault. After listening to Yoo-jun, Officer Park put on a fake smile, but he was extremely scared inside. In no time, he hurriedly left Yoo-jun's office. Officer Park went to the bank and took out all the evidence, and tried to hide it in another place, but he never expected that Yoo-jun had been following him. Officer Park came out of the bank with a smug look on his face. When he was having lunch in the cafeteria, he noticed that Yoo-jun and the others had also followed him in, so he ran away. In order to prevent Yoo-jun from taking the evidence, Officer Park threw the evidence into the dog kennel in a hurry, but he was caught by Yoo-jun. No matter how Yoo-jun tortured Officer Park, he was unwilling to reveal the whereabouts of the evidence, so Yoo-jun had no choice but to let him go first. Officer Park returned to the dog kennel as soon as he got out, but he didn't expect to find the evidence he had left there had disappeared, so he angrily yelled at the dog. But what he didn't expect was that the evidence had already been taken by Ji-ho. Ji-ho looked at all the evidence of Ji-yeon's crimes and was extremely angry, and his sense of guilt towards Jin-hee became stronger and stronger. He then went to find Yoo-jun with the evidence. Yoo-jun suggested handing the evidence over to Jin-hee. Ji-ho felt that it was not the right time. If they handed it over to Jin-hee now, it would probably put her in danger, so they decided to wait for the right moment. At this time, Officer Park also told Ji-yeon about his abduction by Yoo-jun. Upon hearing this news, Ji-yeon instantly panicked, worried about what Officer Park had told Yoo-jun, and came to Yoo-jun to try to find out what she had said. When the two saw Ji-yeon, they couldn't hold back their anger. Yoo-jun confessed that Ji-won was the one she hit. Ji-yeon tried to seek Ji-ho's help, but Ji-ho slapped her, saying what she had done was really too much. However, this was only Ji-ho's imagination. Ji-ho wanted to expose Ji-yeon's ugly face immediately, but the time was not ripe, because the evidence was not yet sufficient to prove her guilt. As Yoo-jun had been on guard against Ji-yeon, Ji-yeon was unable to obtain any useful information from him. However, on the way back, Ji-ho took her to the scene of Ji-won's car accident. Ji-yeon followed Ji-ho, trembling, looking at the familiar streets. Ji-yeon's mind flashed back to the day she hit Ji-won. She finally couldn't help but ask her husband why they suddenly had to come here. Ji-ho said that he felt there was something strange about his sister's car accident. He wanted to re-investigate. He asked Ji-yeon to help him remember the situation at the time, but Ji-yeon simply couldn't tell the truth. Reluctantly, Ji-ho could only say that he would bring Jin-hee to the scene next time. Ji-yeon returned home in a daze. Her heart was filled with unease. She always felt that there was something wrong with Ji-ho, so she hurriedly called Officer Park to ask him whether he still had the evidence from the car accident scene. Officer Park, in order to continue blackmailing Ji-yeon, naturally would not say that the evidence was lost. Ji-yeon was relieved after hearing this. Jin-hee came to the welfare institution to visit the little boy who had been switched with her son. Unexpectedly, the little boy standing next to her was the biological son she had been desperately searching for, because she had received news of her son's death. Jin-hee simply could not recognize him. Just then, Ji-yeon saw Jin-hee meeting with Jerry. She was suddenly scared, her heart racing, and covered her mouth in shock, before quickly finding her grandmother and asking her to call and distract Jin-hee. Her grandmother was also panicking and quickly called Jin-hee, lying that she needed to discuss something with her. After receiving the call, Jin-hee hurriedly bid Jerry farewell. Perhaps due to their blood relationship, Jerry felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity with Jin-hee. Ji-yeon quickly pulled Jerry away, but just as he put Jerry in the back seat of the car and was about to leave, Jin-hee suddenly appeared and called out to her. Ji-yeon was shocked to hear Jin-hee's voice, and nervously ran to the back of the car to block Jerry with her body. Jin-hee saw Ji-yeon's strange behavior, and asked her suspiciously where she was in such a hurry to go, without even taking her bag. Only then did she realize that she had left her bag at her grandmother's in her haste, and quickly took the bag from Jin-hee's hands, saying that she hadn't rested well last night, and had to hurry back to rest. Then she hurriedly drove off, and Jin-hee missed her son again. Ji-ho's investigation revealed that the man who set the fire last time was closely involved with Woolwa. After learning this, he began to secretly follow Woolwa. Sure enough, he ran into her meeting with the man who set the fire. Seeing Ji-ho suddenly appear, Woolwa was not at all surprised, because she had planned to tell Ji-ho the truth. She deliberately led him here. After Woolwa told the man who set the fire to leave, she told Ji-ho everything that Yuri had done to her. Ji-ho learned that his mother was the one who caused Woolwa's family to break up. Immediately, he knelt in front of Woolwa to atone for his mother's sins. Woolwa said that if Ji-ho really cared about his mother, he should return everything and leave. Woolwa gave him 2 weeks to think about it. After hearing this, Ji-ho's heart was filled with mixed emotions. He could give up everything except Jin-hee. He fainted in the office from the shock. Luckily Jin-hee came to find him and sensed something was wrong. With Ji-ho's help, She sent Ji-ho home. Jin-hee looked at her husband lying in bed in pain. She guessed he must have found out the truth, so she stayed to take care of Ji-ho. Ji-ho saw Jin-hee's anxious expression and an inexplicable feeling of jealousy welled up in him. He left Ji-ho's room in a lost state. Jin-hee apologizes to Ji-ho, admitting that she has indeed been hiding something from him, but that she doesn't know what to do. Yuri receives a text message from Hyri, telling her to apologize to Ji-ho. Yuri thinks about how her son has been so sick because of her, and goes to Ji-ho to apologize. However, she keeps emphasizing how hard she has been working, and Ji-ho can't help but speak out about the grievances he has accumulated over the years. Woo-hwa is both angry and distressed as she listens to them in her room. The next day, Ji-ho took the initiative to find Woo-hwa and expressed his sincere apologies to her, before claiming that he would return all the shares of the house and company to her, and asking Woo-hwa to give him some time to convince his mother to leave. Woo-hwa had no objection to this. Subsequently, Ji-ho found Jin-hee and told him that he already knew Woo-hwa's identity. He also hated his mother for doing such a thing, but what can be done? You can't sever the relationship between mother and son. He thought about it a lot and finally chose to break up with Jin-hee. Jin-hee was also reluctant to let Ji-ho go, but could only hug him in grief. That day, Ji-ho deliberately mentioned in front of Ji-yeon the necklace she lost at the scene of the car accident, and asked her why she hadn't been wearing it lately. Ji-yeon immediately lied that she had accidentally lost it. Ji-ho looked at her mockingly after hearing this and just left. Ji-yeon was completely panicked and quickly called Officer Park to ask if he really still had the evidence. This time, Officer Park finally told the truth, and said that he no longer had the evidence to prosecute Ji-yeon. Ji-yeon was beside herself after hearing this, thinking about her husband's unusual behavior in the past 2 days. She guessed that the evidence for the car accident was most likely in Ji-ho's hands. Sure enough, at her father's campaign meeting, she overheard Ji-ho talking to Jin-hee on the phone, saying that he wanted to give something important to Jin-hee. Ji-yeon was extremely nervous after hearing this, suspecting that the evidence was in Ji-ho's handbag. She quietly opened the bag, but was stopped in time by Ji-ho, who had returned. Ji-yeon hurriedly explained that she was looking for something else, in order to get back the evidence of her crime. Ji-yeon called Officer Park again, and said that the evidence was likely in Ji-ho's bag. Learning this news, Officer Park took advantage of the time when Ji-ho and Jin-hee met, and rode a motorcycle to grab Ji-ho's bag. Ji-ho, in a panic, hurriedly chased after him, but was accidentally knocked to the ground by a suddenly appearing car. With Jin-hee's help, Ji-ho was rushed to the hospital. Officer Park also told Ji-yeon about Ji-ho being hit. Upon learning that Ji-ho had been in a car accident, Ji-yeon instantly lost control of her emotions. She hurried to the hospital. Seeing Ji-ho in the hospital bed, Ji-yeon blamed herself. Seeing Jin-hee in the hospital room, Ji-yeon went crazy and blamed Jin-hee for Ji-ho's injury and tried to attack her, but Jin-hee stopped her and left the hospital room. At this time, Ji-yeon received a message from Officer Park, telling her that the evidence was not in the bag, and asking her to check if it was on Ji-ho's body. Hearing this news, Ji-yeon panicked instantly, and hurried to the medical reception desk to try to get Ji-ho's clothes back. The nurse said that someone else had already taken the clothes. Ji-yeon looked and saw that Yoo-jun had taken them. She immediately panicked and chased into Ji-ho's ward. She told Yoo-jun to let her keep Ji-ho's clothes. Yoo-jun had already seen through her thoughts. Ji-yeon got Ji-ho's clothes, but she never found the evidence of her crime. She ran to Ji-ho's car and looked around, but still couldn't find anything. Little did she know that the evidence was all in Jin-hee's hands. It turned out that after Ji-ho was knocked down, she gave all the evidence to Jin-hee. Jin-hee collected the evidence and contacted a friend of the reporter to prepare a column using the evidence to expose Ji-yeon and the others' crimes in front of the whole country. Jin-hee's mother woke up after recovering. At this time, she came to the hospital to visit Ji-ho. Ji-yeon was surprised to see her stepmother, but also panicked. Jin-hee's mother told her to immediately go and tell her father to withdraw his candidacy. In front of everyone, she voluntarily confessed to her crimes. If she didn't do this, she would lose everything. Ji-yeon was worried that her stepmother and Jin-hee would really do something, and hurriedly dissuaded her father from withdrawing his candidacy. But her father, who was sure to win, refused to give up this power and desire. After her stepfather was elected, Jin-hee immediately sent him a basket of cursed flowers. After Ji-ho was discharged from the hospital, Yoo-jun tells him that the person on the motorcycle is Officer Park, and that his wife must be behind it. Ji-ho can't stand it anymore this time, and when he gets home, he confronts Ji-yeon about why she told Officer Park to do it. Ji-yeon still refuses to admit it in the face of her husband's questioning, and says that Jin-hee must have told him something to make Ji-ho not believe her lies. Ji-ho can't stand Ji-yeon's ugly face anymore, and angrily opens the surveillance video in the house, which revealed all the crimes Ji-yeon had committed. Ji-yeon looked at herself in the video and turned pale with fear. She frantically closed the computer, and then argued with a full mouth the person in the video is not her. This ridiculous and childish reason made Ji-ho furious. He had been deceived by his wife for 6 whole several years, like a puppet manipulated by her. Ji-yeon immediately knelt down and begged her husband for forgiveness, asking him to give her some time to sort out her thoughts, and she would explain everything to him. How could Ji-ho forgive the murderer of his sister? He immediately packed Ji-yeon's luggage and threw it out. He would never forgive her for what she had done in his life. On the other side, Ji-yeon's father was being interviewed by a reporter. Jin-hee's mother, who had recovered, happened to come home. Ji-yeon's father was worried that she would say something, so he quickly ended the interview. And Jin-hee's mother came here to tell Ji-yeon's grandmother about her son and granddaughter's crimes. Ji-yeon's grandmother almost fainted when she learned the truth. Jin-hee's mother told them to prepare themselves mentally. She would not let them off the hook. Ji-yeon's grandmother had not yet recovered when she received a call from Yuri. She told her to hurry over. It turned out that Ji-ho had kicked Ji-yeon out, but she refused to leave the house. Yuri told her grandmother to hurry and take Ji-yeon back. Ji-yeon finally left after her grandmother persuaded her. After asking, Grandma finally learned the truth of the matter, and accused Ji-yeon of how she could have done such a heinous thing, and blamed herself for raising her child in such a chaotic manner. But Ji-yeon still does not realize her mistake, and still asks her grandmother to help her get through this difficult time. She really cannot lose Ji-ho. Grandma had no choice but to shamelessly find Jin-hee to apologize to her on Ji-yeon's behalf, and also said that she would help her start a cosmetics company, so that her mother and sister would never lack for food or clothing. Grandma will use everything she has to make amends with Jin-hee, and only asks for her forgiveness for Ji-yeon. However, Jin-hee's attitude is very firm. She must make those who have committed mistakes all accept punishment. After saying that, she was about to leave. Grandma hurriedly stopped Jin-hee and took out a large bag of cash. Jin-hee said that not everything can be solved with money, and then left directly. Grandma was also helpless and didn't know what way to save Ji-yeon. Ji-ho asked Jin-hee out and told her to keep the evidence safe. Then the two of them met, and the scene was seen by Ji-yeon, who was nearby. She wanted to drive directly and kill Jin-hee. Seeing that Jin-hee was about to leave, she gave up the idea of rushing her. Ji-yeon then followed Jin-hee to the TV station, and happened to see Jin-hee talking to the reporter about the broadcast of the program. After learning this news, Ji-yeon hurried home to tell her father and grandmother about it. As long as Jin-hee broadcasts the evidence she has collected, it will be a devastating blow to their family. They now realize that Jin-hee helped her father get to power just for this moment to come. Grandma told her son to do everything in his power to stop Jin-hee's broadcast. Ji-yeon's father hurriedly found his immediate supervisor, and threatened him with the video of Ji-yeon's grandmother bribing him, in an attempt to persuade him to help him quell the matter. The representative of the National Assembly, who had taken Ji-yeon's grandmother's advantage, and was afraid of being implicated, found the head of the TV station and attempted to stop the broadcast of this episode. Although the head of the radio station was reluctant, he was unable to do anything in the face of political pressure. The reporter quickly received a call from the leader, and was told that the program had been suspended. The Ji-yeon family let out a sigh of relief as things worked out. Ji-yeon's father also realized that having power in his hands could change the world. Those with more ambition wanted to climb up the ladder. At this moment, Jin-hee moved the production director with the story of her child. She decided to continue secretly producing the show without their knowledge. After learning the news, Ji-ho handed Jin-hee the DVD she secretly took of Ji-yeon. She hoped to do her best to help her. On Jerry's birthday, Jin-hee went to the tree burial ground to pay her respects. Ji-ho couldn't get in touch with Jin-hee, so she called Suya to ask about Jin-hee's whereabouts. Suya accidentally let slip her sister's whereabouts. Ji-ho went to the tree burial ground with doubts to find Jin-hee. He finally learned that Jin-hee had given birth to a child for him in prison, but Ji-ho had not yet seen the child before parting with him. Jin-hee did not tell him the real reason why the child died, and just asked Ji-ho to bury this matter deep in his heart. Ji-ho could not accept this fact at once and broke down. While feeling sad, he also blamed himself immensely. Subsequently, Ji-ho came to Jin-hee's mother, and knelt down to repent to her for his wrongdoings. She did not protect Jin-hee and the child, and let her loved one suffer unjustly in prison. Jin-hee's mother pulled up Ji-ho, who was kneeling on the ground, and did not accept his apology, because Jin-hee's mother felt that she and Ji-ho were both sinners, and made Jin-hee suffer so much pain and torture alone. Afterwards, Ji-ho found the fat girl alone, and asked her the reason for Jerry's death. The fat girl really hated Ji-ho, and he was not there when Jin-hee needed him. Now that Jin-hee has decided to live a good life, he appears. The fat girl accused him of how much more pain he wants to bring to Jin-hee before he gives up. Ji-ho admitted that he had been avoiding it. Now he wants to know the truth and make amends to Jin-hee. In the end, the fat girl tells the truth about the death of her child. Ji-ho is beside himself. Why does everything have to do with Ji-yeon? The anger in his heart has reached the limit. Furious, he goes to find Ji-yeon. Without saying a word, He slaps her. Ji-yeon's grandmother is shocked when she sees it. Ji-ho angrily asks Ji-yeon what she has done to his son. Ji-yeon's grandmother saw her granddaughter being bullied and asked what she was doing. Ji-ho questioned whether his grandmother also knew the truth. His grandmother was about to tell Ji-ho that her child was still alive, but Ji-yeon stopped her. Ji-yeon said that she just wanted her child to grow up in a good environment. She never expected an accident to happen. Hearing Ji-yeon still arguing, Ji-ho couldn't control his anger. He got so angry that he smashed the vase nearby. He will make Ji-yeon suffer. After saying that, he left. Ji-yeon tried to go after him, but her grandmother stopped her. She sat on the ground, crying and asking her grandmother what she should do. Her grandmother asked her why she didn't tell Ji-ho that he was still alive. Ji-yeon was afraid that if Ji-ho knew that his child was still alive, he would get back together with Jin-hee. Her grandmother was so angry at Ji-yeon that she was about to die. Now she has the mood to care about this. She accused Ji-yeon of becoming so vicious. How will she atone for these sins in the future? Ji-yeon's father also learned that Jin-hee was still alive. He secretly exposed him, so he found the higher-ups at the TV station and persuaded them with his position as a member of parliament. And in the end, the entire department's programs were cancelled, and the two people who helped Jin-hee were also disciplined for it, which made Jin-hee extremely angry. So she directly met with her stepfather, who looked confident and happy. Jin-hee said, "Doesn't he feel ashamed?" Her stepfather doesn't think so, believing that Jin-hee is just wasting her time. He even urges her to stop. Ji-yeon's life has been ruined. She can't get pregnant and has been kicked out of her husband's house. She has also been punished appropriately. Jin-hee didn't come here to listen to her stepfather's nonsense. Instead, she warns him that the show will definitely be broadcast. Jin-hee says that she will definitely reveal all the truth, in order to make public the evidence of Ji-yeon and others' crimes. Jin-hee and her family went to the TV station with Ji-ho and his group to protest, and asked the public to sign a petition to let the show air, in an attempt to use public opinion to pressure the relevant units, and regain the right to broadcast the show. Ji-yeon, on the other hand, was mentally affected by the blow when the matter was exposed, and ate everything in sight but still couldn't fill her stomach, which worried her grandmother and father a lot. Meanwhile, Ji-ho, who was on the verge of collapse, found Yoo-jun and told him about his son. Yoo-jun suddenly remembered what Officer Park had said, that he still had a piece of living evidence in his hands, and wondered if it had something to do with the child. Ji-ho wanted to find Officer Park to find out the truth, but the other party was now hiding so well that he could not be found at all. Ji-yeon had recovered after some adjustment, and was preparing to send Jerry back to the UK again. Just then, Ji-ho called her out. Ji-yeon thought that her husband had forgiven her, but Ji-ho just wanted to know how she had taken the child away. So he took him to the welfare institute where Jerry had been fostered, and asked Ji-yeon to reenact how she abducted Jerry. Ji-yeon was panic-stricken and said she didn't know anything. At this time, the director brought the information about the child who was switched with Jerry. Ji-yeon was nervous when she saw the information. When Ji-ho saw the name Jerry written on the information, he was shocked. He realized that his dead son might still be alive, and that he should be the child he had played with before. Upon learning that his son might still be alive, Ji-ho instantly felt relieved. Ji-yeon, on the other hand, was panicking. After leaving the orphanage, Ji-ho immediately questioned Ji-yeon about where Jerry was. Ji-yeon, however, quickly denied that Jerry was the son. He claimed that Jerry's name was very common and that it was just an occasional name duplication. Facing Ji-yeon's denial, Ji-ho instantly lost control of his emotions. He then drove away alone. Ji-yeon, in order to prevent Ji-ho from meeting Jerry, immediately contacted Jerry's adoptive mother and asked them to pack their things and leave. She will buy a ticket to fly to the UK tomorrow. Ji-ho asked Yoo-jun for help. He asked Officer Park if the son was Jerry. Yoo-jun called him and asked what the living proof was. Officer Park panicked and made up an excuse. Yoo-jun threatened to use the video of him being bribed if he didn't want to talk. Officer Park was furious and immediately called Ji-yeon. He asked how Yoo-jun knew that son was still alive. Ji-yeon panicked when she heard this and immediately went out to the airport to stop them. On the way, she noticed Ji-ho secretly following her. Ji-yeon, in a hurry, called Officer Park and asked him to go to the airport and pick up Jerry for her. Ji-yeon would try to distract Ji-ho. After hanging up the phone, she immediately turned around and tried to lure Ji-ho to somewhere else. Unexpectedly, Ji-ho saw the road sign ahead, which was the road to the airport, and remembered that Ji-yeon had said she wanted to send Jerry back to the UK, so he guessed Ji-yeon's intention, and stepped on the accelerator and drove directly to the airport. Ji-ho arrived at the airport and immediately ran to the front desk, and asked the staff to help check Jerry's information. You learned that the direction you were looking for was correct. Ji-ho hurriedly looked all over the airport for his son, but unexpectedly Jerry was taken away by Officer Park. Ji-yeon let out a sigh of relief when she learned that Jerry had been taken away from the airport. Ji-ho searched every corner of the airport, but never found his son. He asked the staff to check the airport surveillance for him, and discovered that Jerry had been taken away by Officer Park. Ji-yeon's actions made Ji-ho even more certain that Jerry was his son. On the other hand, Ji-ho learned that Jin-hee's program could not be broadcast. He wanted to stay and help her, so he asked Wool-wah to let him stay for a while. But Wool-wah believed that the more Ji-ho did not leave, the more painful it would be, and asked him to keep his promise. Wool-wah deliberately asked Yuri to go to her room, so that Yuri could discover that she was Hyri, and that her son had submitted his resignation. Yuri suddenly understood and immediately found Ji-ho. She did not agree with her son quitting his job like this, and persuaded him not to give up on his love. Ji-ho, however, told his mother to let go of everything and go abroad with him to start over. He bought a small villa there. Yuri was unwilling to leave like this. Ji-ho also told Jin-hee that son was still alive. On hearing this, Jin-hee became excited. She hurriedly went with Ji-ho to Ji-yeon's house, and asked her grandmother where Ji-yeon was. The grandmother said they didn't know where Ji-yeon was either. The two searched the house but couldn't find Ji-yeon or son anywhere. Jin-hee, who couldn't find her son, lost control of herself. She begged her grandmother to tell her where Ji-yeon was. After Jin-hee's desperate pleading, her grandmother felt sorry for her and told her where Ji-yeon was. Jin-hee broke down in tears after hearing the news. That night, Yoo-jun and Ji-ho blocked Officer Park at the intersection, and asked him where he had taken son. Facing Ji-ho, who looked like she wanted to eat him, Officer Park admitted that he had taken son, but he had given the child to Ji-yeon on the way. He didn't know where son was. Ji-ho angrily punched Officer Park. Ji-yeon secretly took her sister's child away in order to prevent her sister from recognizing her son. Ji-yeon's actions also completely angered Jin-hee. Jin-hee posted a video trailer of all the evidence she had collected on the internet. Under the protest and public opinion of netizens, Jin-hee's program was finally able to be broadcast smoothly. In order to protect himself, the representative of the National Assembly returned all the cash that Ji-yeon's grandmother had bribed him with, and asked Ji-yeon's father to resign from his position as a member of parliament. Ji-yeon's father, though terrified, implored his boss not to abandon him, but ultimately failed to change his mind. Soon, Jin-hee's program trailer was broadcast on major radio stations. Ji-yeon was instantly panicked when she saw this. She took the initiative to contact Jin-hee and used Jerry to make a deal with her, to immediately cancel the broadcast of the program and return Jerry. Moreover, Jin-hee was told to go to a designated place alone with the evidence. For the sake of her son, Jin-hee had no choice but to obey Ji-yeon. She followed Ji-yeon's instructions and went to the agreed location alone with the evidence. However, Ji-ho was worried that Ji-yeon was up to something and secretly followed behind. At this time, Ji-yeon's father received news that Jin-hee had applied for a retrial of the case from 5 years ago. Officer Park believed that Jin-hee was not truly giving up on revenge. Therefore, he quickly called Ji-yeon to inform her that she had fallen for her trap. Jin-hee had only delayed the broadcast of the program. Ji-yeon immediately took the evidence from Jin-hee's hands after learning the news, and then gave Jin-hee a fake address for Jerry. Although Jin-hee suspected that the address might be fake, she had no choice but to trust Ji-yeon in order to find her son. Ji-yeon got up to leave when she was suddenly grabbed by Ji-ho, and under Ji-ho's coercion she also got into the car. On the way to the villa, Ji-yeon did not sit around and do nothing. She quickly sent a text message to Jerry's adoptive mother, telling her to quickly pack her bags and hand the child over to a nearby restaurant, and took advantage of Ji-ho's gas station to get out of the car. Jin-hee saw this and quickly got out of the car and grabbed Ji-yeon. Ji-yeon saw a car in front of her and took the opportunity to push Jin-hee down. She quickly ran to the car and lied that someone had kidnapped her. The driver believed it and took off with the accelerator. Ji-ho tried his best to catch up, but in the end he couldn't catch up to the car, and could only watch the car leave. With no choice, the two had to split up. Jin-hee rushed to the villa while Ji-ho went after Ji-yeon. When Jin-hee ran into the villa in a panic, she didn't see her son. On the verge of a nervous breakdown, she desperately shook the woman's body, begging her to give her son back. Only then did the woman realize that Jin-hee was Jerry's biological mother. She just told her that Ji-yeon had just taken the child away. Soon the police came and took the woman to the police station for investigation. Ji-yeon was in a panic and fled with Jerry, in order to keep Jerry obedient. She lied that she was going on a trip. The young Jerry didn't know anything and cooperated with Ji-yeon expectantly. To prevent being tracked by the police, Ji-yeon deliberately removed the battery from her phone and threw it on the roadside along with the phone. Yoo-jun then found Ji-yeon's location by tracking the phone's location, but when they arrived at the location, they only saw the phone thrown on the roadside and learned that Ji-yeon had escaped by changing cars. The police immediately issued an order to search for her by car plate number. Ji-yeon had already prepared for this. She left her car on the national highway and packed a few simple belongings to continue wandering with Jerry in order to find Ji-yeon as soon as possible. Jin-hee deliberately took the police to Ji-yeon's home. Learning that Ji-yeon had committed a serious crime, her grandmother couldn't believe it. The police took away the cell phones of Ji-yeon's grandmother and father and installed all tracking and positioning equipment. At this time, the people from the prosecutor's office also suddenly came to the door and arrested Ji-yeon's father for violating the Public Offices Election Act. It turned out that after the reporter learned that Jin-hee was forced to stop the broadcast, he handed over the video of Ji-yeon's grandmother bribing his superior to the prosecutor's office in order to protect himself. The superior put all the blame on Ji-yeon's father. Ji-yeon's father therefore not only bore all the bribery charges and was permanently removed from politics by the National Assembly representative. At this time, Ji-yeon accidentally saw the news of her father's arrest on TV. She was extremely panicked and also worried that her grandmother would faint as a result. So Ji-yeon hurriedly called her grandmother. Unexpectedly, the house had already been taken over by the police. The police told her grandmother to find a way to persuade Ji-yeon so that she could help her. Her grandmother had already realized the crime her granddaughter had committed and tried her best to persuade Ji-yeon to turn herself in. She told her to kneel down and apologize to everyone so that she could be forgiven. But Ji-yeon remained stubborn. Grandma tried to delay the call as long as possible, and the police were able to track down Ji-yeon's location as a result. Meanwhile, Ji-ho was planning to fly to France with her mother today to fulfill her promise to Julia. Unexpectedly, a phone call from Yoo-jun forced her to stay here forever. On the phone, Yoo-jun told her that Ji-yeon had disappeared with Jerry without keeping her promise. Hearing the news, Ji-ho couldn't rest. Jin-hee. He quickly called the airline to change the flight schedule. Ji-ho rode his scooter alone, asking around for Ji-yeon's whereabouts, and finally found a clue near where Ji-yeon lived. According to the shop owner's wife, Ji-yeon had come here with her child to buy food. At that moment, Ji-yeon happened to come shopping and saw Ji-ho asking about her. She quickly fled the scene. With the help of the shop owner's wife, Ji-ho successfully learned Ji-yeon's address. However, at that moment Jerry ran alone to the abandoned house next door and started a fire. Unexpectedly, the fire spread instantly. In no time Jerry was surrounded by the raging flames, just as the neighbors were urgently fighting the fire. Ji-ho arrived at the scene in time. Hearing the child's cries, he quickly picked up a large basin of water and poured it over himself. Without hesitation, he rushed into the burning wooden house. Just then, Jin-hee and Ji-ho also found their way here by following the location. Ji-ho quickly wrapped Jerry in his soaked clothes and wrapped the baby in his wet clothes. As he was about to rush out, he was unfortunately hit in the leg by a falling piece of wood. Jerry cried out in fear. Jin-hee heard her son's cries and was about to rush in, but Ji-ho stopped him. Ji-ho splashed some water and rushed into the house. Ji-ho used all his strength to hand Jerry over to Jin-hee, but he was unable to move because he was pinned under the wood. Ji-ho successfully rescued Jerry. Then he rescued Ji-ho as soon as possible. Jin-hee then realized that the person who saved her son was Ji-ho, and she cried out Ji-ho's name in grief. Ji-ho slowly opened his eyes, but passed out again due to his severe injuries. Jin-hee and Ji-ho were filled with grief. Ji-yeon, however, trembled and hid away, her eyes filled with panic and guilt, but she did not choose to turn herself in. Instead, hiding like a dog with a broken leg, Ji-ho was rushed to the hospital. Yuri prepared everything to fly abroad with her son, but she heard the news of her son's accident and hurried to the hospital. Seeing her son still being resuscitated inside, she couldn't accept the blow for a while and sat on the ground, crying out loud. Yuri thought she was being punished, so she hurried back and returned everything to its owner. She prayed to God to forgive her. Jin-hee finally found Jerry and brought him home to live together. The fat girl learned from Jin-hee that Ji-ho had saved Jerry at the risk of his own life and was seriously injured in the process. She immediately exclaimed that Ji-ho was a great person. The fat girl also finally told Jin-hee that Ji-ho was Jack. Jin-hee then learned that Ji-ho had silently done so much for her behind the scenes. Subsequently, she hurried to the hospital. Although Ji-ho received timely surgical treatment, the situation was not optimistic. There was a risk of death at any time. With Jin-hee's constant encouragement, Ji-ho finally regained some consciousness. He said with all his strength that he hoped Ji-ho and Jin-hee could live happily together, and apologized to Ji-ho on behalf of his mother, hoping that Ji-ho could forgive his mother for her mistakes. Then Ji-ho took Ji-ho's hand and encouraged him to hang on. Hearing Ji-ho's understanding, Ji-ho couldn't help but smile a little at the corner of his mouth, but in the end he was unable to pull through, and closed his eyes forever with a smile on his face. After the grief, Jin-hee used all the evidence to record the program, which was finally broadcast nationwide. Ji-yeon was shocked when she saw the program. The reporter used the evidence in their possession to restore the truth of 5 years ago, exposing Ji-yeon's crimes and clearing Jin-hee's name. It also exposed the dirty deeds of Ji-yeon's father, as well as Officer Park and Lawyer Min. Ji-yeon is completely finished now. She is now wanted by the entire country. Ji-yeon was so scared that she curled up in a ball and fell into a panic. Just then, Ji-ho and Yoo-jun also found Ji-yeon's hiding place. They directly blocked Ji-yeon in the room and told her not to escape and admit her crime. Ji-yeon's heart was full of fear, but she did not surrender. Instead, she escaped from the balcony. When Ji-ho and Yoo-jun broke open the door, Ji-yeon had disappeared without a trace. They immediately ran downstairs, but they were too late. Ji-yeon found that her crime was being broadcast on the car's TV and quickly asked the driver to turn it off. The driver did not recognize her as the wanted criminal. On the way back, Yoo-jun told Ji-ho the truth about Julia's identity. It was the anniversary of Ji-ho's father's death. Julia had set up offerings in the living room. The mother and son finally recognized each other after all their hardships. However, Ji-ho's heart could not calm down for a long time. Although Son returned to his biological mother, he could not accept his background for a while, and was always depressed. After learning this, Yoo-jun wanted Jin-hee to cultivate a relationship with Son, and proposed to take everyone on a trip to his beach house. In order to give Ji-ho the opportunity to spend time with Jin-hee and her son, he specially informed Ji-ho to go together. With Jin-hee's efforts, Son finally accepted Jin-hee as his biological mother, which finally relieved Jin-hee's heavy heart. Ji-ho watched this incredibly happy and warm scene, and her heart was filled with endless remorse. If only they had been able to live this happily from the beginning. How wonderful it would be. Ji-ho apologized to Jin-hee for not believing her at the beginning, and also revealed her feelings that she could not forget her. Ji-yeon, who had followed secretly, saw all this and was furious. She was unwilling to let Jin-hee live a happy life, so she kept watching from afar. Finally, Ji-yeon waited for another opportunity to strike. While Jin-hee was looking for the necklace, she took the son away again. Fortunately, Jin-hee noticed in time and prevented this tragedy from happening. Jin-hee was worried that the son would be hurt again, so he let him run back to the villa first. Ji-yeon is still unrepentant. She thinks it is Jin-hee who has made her like this. Her father was arrested. Her grandmother is sick, and Jin-hee is here on a happy vacation. Jin-hee said that her revenge was to continue to be happy. Ji-yeon, on the other hand, would never be able to survive in society with that face. Ji-yeon admitted that Jin-hee's revenge had succeeded. Before long, the two of them were wrestling in the sea. Ji-yeon was extremely frightened when she saw Jin-hee suddenly disappear. At this moment, Jin-hee was washed away by the huge waves to another beach. Ji-yeon came to the car in a daze, trying to escape from here, but her mind was already not normal at this time and she began to hallucinate. Jin-hee went ashore and anxiously searched for Ji-yeon, worried that she had run away again like this, but who knew that Ji-yeon had fallen into the sea. The kind-hearted Jin-hee still rescued her. The police arrived and immediately arrested Ji-yeon. On the other side, Officer Park, who was preparing to leave the country, was captured by Yoo-jun and handed over to the police. Ji-yeon, who was arrested and taken to the detention center, resisted desperately, saying that Jin-hee had ruined her life, and that she was not at fault. She showed no remorse. When the other inmates learned of Ji-yeon's crime, they gave her a severe beating. Ji-yeon did not give up. She tried to convince the defense lawyer to help her get out. If she succeeded, she would pay a handsome reward. The lawyer said he could not help. All she could expect was a prison sentence. Soon the court reopened Jin-hee's case, which had been closed for 6 years. Ji-yeon and the others pleaded guilty in the face of overwhelming evidence. Ji-yeon was the only one who kept her mouth shut and steadfastly denied the crimes she had committed, and showed no signs of remorse. But this did not affect the punishment she received under the law. In the end, Jin-hee's charges were overturned and she was found innocent. At this moment, the first person Jin-hee thought of was Ji-ho, the man who had always given her hope and strength. Ji-yeon's father was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Officer Park was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and the vicious Ji-yeon was sentenced to life imprisonment. Hearing this sentence, Ji-yeon instantly despaired. Ji-yeon's grandmother also fainted on the spot due to her panic. In the end, Ji-yeon was sent to prison in despair and fear, just like Jin-hee at the beginning. She was dragged into the prison cell extremely unwillingly. After her innocence was restored, Jin-hee had her own cosmetics company. Her business was booming. At one point, she became the most famous entrepreneur in the country. And Yoo-jun, in the process of helping Jin-hee, also developed a fondness for her younger sister. The two eventually entered into marriage. At the wedding of Yoo-jun and Suya, Ji-ho once again confessed his love to Jin-hee, saying that no matter how long it takes, he will always wait. But now Jin-hee finds it hard to open her heart to Ji-ho. Ji-yeon began to give up on herself while in prison. Jin-hee, who came to give lectures in prison, felt very heavy-hearted when she saw Ji-yeon. Understanding Ji-yeon's trauma in her childhood, Jin-hee decides to try to forgive Ji-yeon. Jin-hee, in order to give Ji-yeon the motivation to live, not only asked the church aunt to enlighten her, but also brought her Jerry's paintings and a letter she wrote to her. With Jin-hee's tolerant efforts, Ji-yeon also found hope to live. At the same time, the evil heart was slowly purified, and she made a deep confession to Jin-hee in her heart. Jin-hee lived a happy life from then on through her own efforts. Okay, the story ends here. In fact, the most pitiful person in the entire drama is Ji-ho. The greatest person in the entire drama is also Ji-ho. When Jin-hee saw no hope in prison, it was he who gave Jin-hee the motivation. And in the end, he lost his life trying to save Jin-hee's child. Perhaps this is the reason why a person who loves someone is willing to give everything for her.